Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And I call to order the Mundelein Elementary School District 75 Board of Education meeting. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Holly,
Here?
Rose,
Here.
Carl, here, Hitzke.
Here.
Gallegos,
Here.
Fingerhut here, Village here.
Here.
Present.
Okay, seeing no one in the audience. Is there anyone online that would like to address the board this evening? If you would like to do so, please click the raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen. Is there anyone on? Okay, all right, we will move on. First up is Board of Education comments. Anyone have anything for the good of the group?
I will just point out that the middle school band is marching in the high school's homecoming parade on Friday. And that will be going down Holly at 3:30 on Friday. And so we have our 7th and 8th grade band students and an assortment of them who are acting as color guard. And also marching in that, and they will be ending at the school, so they won't be going all the way to the high school, but if anyone wants to support our, I will be there on the flag cheering. Welcome to join as well.
Thank you.
I also just wanted to say thanks for the Brat Fest, for everyone who put that together, for Mark and everyone. I thought it went very nicely this year. I feel like it's been a while since it's felt normal, right? And it was very nice.
Very cool.
Was, and I still have the softest hands from doing the corn and butter.
Anyone else? I'd like to publicly and officially invite, welcome Ray back to our board meeting. It's good to have you next to me, Ray. Okay.
Good to be back.
I told Dave before that in our agenda meeting on Friday, I told Ray to make sure he got a nap today, so he can stay with us today. Okay, moving on, we're gonna go to the District 75 reports. The first off is the business office, and I think I heard Dave's gonna go first.
Yep, and I get Dave's gonna let me lead off.
Excellent.
So to start off this evening with the business report, we had a little prelude to that in the last meeting, saying that the finance committee has been going through some options to be able to look at a potential stage at Carl Sandburg. So this evening is the first step in that process, or second step really. You'll be able to hear from members of our finance committee along with T of what's been going on. And this meeting, the purpose of this right now is to try to share all the information that they've been able to pull together, to say what they think would be a viable option if the board wanted to select to go forward. There will not be any action on this at all tonight. What we would like to do is then be able to come back at the October meeting and revisit the topic and say if there's anything else, and then that would be a potential time that we could ask the board for a recommendation, depending on any of the conversations or follow-ups that we have between now and then. So that's the process that we're looking to be able to employ. What's taking place a little bit beforehand is just so what you'll know, you'll hear. Dave's gonna come up first to give you an outline so you can all see very rough draft, because we did not take this to an architect or anybody to draw, because we weren't going to invest in it yet until we knew what direction that you as a board wanted to go and support as well. So Dave's going to take you through some of those options, that option that we've got, and you can have some visuals. Then we're going to be able to have Eric Anderson come up. He's our managing director for our funds. He's going to go through the intricacies of bindings. And Freddie mentioned this last meeting, and I'm also going to forewarn you now. There's no test or quiz on any of the finances that Eric's going to present. It's a lot of numbers and it can get confusing. But I think you'll hear the two guiding principles that we're really looking to do with maintaining the tax rate for our taxpayers and maintaining our good financial standings are key hallmarks for us in going through this. And then to sum it up, T's going to finish it up for you. She's going to go through some of the options that she's looked at to see how could we finance this? And would that be something of interest for you? And if you'd have any further questions on those financing needs. So it's an exciting opportunity. I'm looking forward to hearing more of the presentation, your feedback, and to get us going. Mr. Jerome.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence.
No, sir.
Fellow board members and staff that are here today. I'm here to go over a few things that I have brought to the finance committee. Just some of the facts about it and some of the ins and outs of what we would like to do for the future. We have our first slide up. Our capacity is going to be between 300 and 400 people will be guests will be able to be into the audience. They will be movable seats. We're not looking to put auditorium stage in or auditorium seats or anything like that. And so then we could still use the gym for other viable things throughout the day. the new construction space is about 5,600 square feet. The renovation would be about 4,400 square feet of the existing gym and storage offices. There will be 4 bathrooms in this facility. We're trying to get 4 bathrooms so we can have it self-contained. Anybody who does come and use the gym or the auditorium will not be able to get into the rest of the building. Audio and video equipment in the last few years, we have spent about $30,000 on some equipment that we put in at Lincoln. Some of the older board members know about that and have heard about that. We will move that over to Carl Sandburg. One, to keep the cost down, so we don't need to buy 2 sets of audio video equipment. The overall cost of the project is going to be about $4.5 million, $4.5 million. There is a potential savings of about $250,000. That's going to, once we talk to the Lake County assessors, if we need to put in a retention pond bigger than the one we have. I don't foresee that because we're going concrete over concrete. We're not digging up any ground, so there won't be additional water absorption that we're going to need. So I'm not foreseeing that to happen. The roof that is on this building, so we won't have to put a roof, is about 35 years old. We just put it on in 2020. So we wouldn't have a problem with the roof. The timeline of the project is between 6 months and a year. A lot of that is going to determine HVAC equipment and audio video equipment, scheduling and timeline of that stuff being built. Next slide, please.
So real quick, Dave, that
Yeah.
4.5,
Yes, sir.
that's without getting hard numbers from our architect. So that was a general estimate,
Yes,
which we need to have sharpened up before we get to a point. right?
yes, yes. Next slide, please. The benefits of having a stage at Carl Sandburg. One of the benefits is my staffs have to spend 2 to 3 days sometimes building a stage at Lincoln to extend it so we could have some of the performances that the band department and the musical department put on there. Also, Lincoln students will have their gym back. We take it away. We take more than a third of their gym away over 2 months while these performances go on. So they will be allowed to have their gym back. The cost of transporting the students back and forth from Lincoln, from the other buildings, Carl Sandburg. Stage can be used for other events, things like the spelling bee, Sandburg's Got Talent, choir and band. We could start the new year and end of year ceremonies there. We could also expand for the band. They could come and practice in an area that gives them true sound of what they're going to be putting on. They could have longer practices when they have the musicals because they're isolated with time because of Lincoln. We can only get in there after a certain amount of time. So there's a lot of benefits to having it in that building. Next slide, please. So this is just a rough drawing, like Dr. Meyer said, that we drew up on a piece of paper just so we could see some of the potentials that will be there. It will turn into a self-contained building, so we would have 2 restrooms here. The front vestibule would now come off the front walkway. This would be our stage. We would have a handicap ramp to get to the back. We would have dressing rooms and storage rooms on this side, office, an electrical room. The water department, more storage down at the end. We would have the driveway up the side that leads back to our shop for loading and unloading equipment that needs to be brought into the stage area.
Does everybody understand what the orientation of that would be in front of the building? So where the restrooms, vestibule, that's the current main entrance.
Yes,
Opposite where we're at. And then
this is our current main entrance. Our office is right here. Our front offices are right here. So this would be the parking lot. And we would take it from the building all the way out to the parking lot.
It's currently all what?
And this is all asphalt where we keep the kids, keep the bikes. That's why I said about that $250,000. We're going concrete over concrete. So we're not losing the water absorption anywhere. And that's what the Lake County assessors would look into is where is this water going to go? Well, right now it just flows into our grass now. This is the 6th grade hallway. So like I said, everything would be self-contained in one area. Next slide, please.
So Dave,
Yes.
the parking lot, you say is behind the stage area?
Anna, can you back up? The parking lot is in front of this, yes, behind the stage area. Right now, this is the existing parking lot now.
For the bus lane.
And the
Right.
bus lane runs right here, yes. And then curves out to California Avenue.
So will that current parking accommodate what we're anticipating?
Yes. Our parking lots now are only half to 3/4 of the way full. We can get almost 300 cars in our parking lot on the whole piece of property between the north gym and the front main entrance here. Something I would look into, I haven't talked to Carol about, but possibly extending this parking lot out to the end of this property instead of stopping here, adding another 30 or 40 cars. That's something that still would be in the works that we would discuss after the fact.
Yeah.
Like I said, a lot of this is still preliminary and it's just a red marker that I drew with of our design.
Yeah.
It's still, I mean, because the parking lot at Sandberg is still substantially larger than the one at Lincoln, so it still would be advantageous over the current.
Yes,
'Cause all-
people
when
won't
all
have
the
to park on the
performances-
street like they do at Lincoln or that back parking lot along that factory auto dealership.
As it is now, when we have school events at Sandberg, people can park in the surrounding neighborhoods when the lot is full. But
Yes.
that would be no different than what, because there's also the parking lot at the Memorial Park down the street too.
Yes.
That is overflow, but it still would be more convenient than what's happening now at Lincoln, which limits how many people we can have at shows and everything else. So,
Right, and it'll also, a lot of traffic jams that we have for these shows really blocks up 176. For them to be able to pull onto the side street and then into our property would,
'cause it's such a narrow driveway.
exactly. Next slide, please. So this is our original stage at Lincoln now. You can see the new lighting up in the picture, all of that we get moved. But when I took the picture was, they're almost 20 feet off of the stage there. This stage is very, very shallow. It doesn't give us a lot of space, so we have to build this extension just for the shows to be on. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a preliminary picture. This is from Emerson School District. This is similar to what we would be looking at. We have the wrought iron ceiling like this. We would be putting in the ductwork in the ceiling for the heating and air conditioning, so it would be blowing down, not univents on the walls anymore. All of the storage for the chairs would be underneath. Our ramps would be going around the back, the handicap ramps, and then there's also stairs on each side.
And the lighting and everything else would be installed.
Would all be installed, yes,
Sound system.
yes. And it would be moved over and then reinstalled into the new area. Are there any questions or comments?
How many typically do you get at Lincoln for a performance? Will this
Between a
increase?
4-day span to over 1,500. Because they do double shows on Saturday and Sunday. So it's
So-
usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, between 300, 250 and 300 per show.
Okay, so that's what you can see. So we'll have an increase in the amount of seating.
Yes, sir.
Which could also increase the revenue.
Yes, sir.
Because many of the families go multiple times, and so,
Yeah.
and they're almost always sold out.
And also about revenue is I have been also talking to the Kirk players. I've been talking to Libertyville Improv. They would be interested in something like this. I've been talking to Rita Washburn, who is our librarian at Mechanics Grove. She works with Lake Zurich. They would be interested in renting something like this. There are options of bringing some finances in.
Especially since, because the Kirk players use a lot of the high school, but the high school is very busy with its own stage.
And very big. They're looking for smaller places. I actually talked to her for over an hour at Rockfest. They're looking for something a little bit smaller and this would really fit their needs.
I think the one thing too to talk about is what does it also mean for our programming? So right now, it's after school activity, you start seeing more of our students becoming more interested, not just in theater, but you're talking choir, you're talking band. All those different avenues, disciplines can use this space,
Yes.
so that might become more incorporated in what we're offering our students, just even during the day.
And our community, right?
And I know there's a strong desire for the people that. I've heard lots of families, who participate in choir would be very interested in having it be curricular rather than just extracurricular.
Yes.
Because, all these they all have things after school, so if they can have, this is one of their electives, they, would. Love that, and I say it again, but I'll say it again. If any of you haven't been to any of the shows that the district puts on, they are amazing. They work very hard. The staff works way more than the hours that they're paid to work to do it. And they put on an amazing show. So this, would only increase. And I know this year they're doing Newsies and apparently there's 29 leads. So there's a lot of spots, open and they're really trying to, encourage more kids to do it, and this, allows it to. It wouldn't be for this year, but
Yes,
as an example of
yes.
what they're doing, and, she does a really good job putting that on, and the kids really like it, and there's opportunities to be on stage, behind stage, running the sound, running the light, they get experience that then they can take with them to go to the high school and work on all of those things too.
And that's part of this is bringing them into the high school, one step ahead. So they can get into it, 2 feet running at the high school.
If you've ever listened to a band concert in the North Gym at Carl Sandburg, you would know that that's another reason for doing something.
Agreed.
Does Dave, or does anyone have a sense on how much this gym is used during the day at Sandburg?
It was used a lot more through COVID because of lunches. They use it for, I would say probably an hour and a half throughout the day, just for breaks, classroom breaks. Right now it's full of scarce books, so that it's not being used quite that often, but 6, 8 kids might use it 2, 3 times a day.
So this would be utilized more often.
Utilize more often, yes, sir.
Another thing I was thinking of too was that the bands, having had 2 kids go through the program there, a lot of the band concerts are done at the high school because there's not space to have all the kids and their parents and everything else, or they're done at the North Gym.
Or in a multi-purpose room where we're all trying to cram in on a little
Yeah.
put together stage.
Right, so this, which acoustics, again, are not, ideal for that. So, this would also allow, the bands to use that and do that, which is already a class in our
Sure.
school.
It would also free up some rooms that we have, like the choir room. They could do their choir in here instead of doing it in a classroom now where they're not getting the sound and the feedback that they need. Any more questions? Thank you all for listening. Now comes up T. She's going to talk about some finance options.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing with us the vision, and thank you to the board for allowing me to come up here and explain to you the funding options that we have researched that are hopefully going to help us see that vision become a reality. First, I'd like to say that this is not a project that was done by one person. This is a project that started by the Finance Committee back in May. And through the coming months, what we did was we spent time looking at all of the funding options available to us. And then we slowly worked our way to the options that became more and more prevalent as being in alignment with those goals that we have. And ultimately, our goals, as Dr. Meyer said, were to, number 1, remain financially stable, and 2, have the least impact on the taxpayer as possible. So a little bit later, we're going to talk about the impact on the taxpayer. What I want to address first and foremost is the financial stability part. So we looked at things such as the use of fund balance. We looked at calling for a referendum. We looked at alternative revenue source bonds. We looked at debt certificates. So we looked at a bunch of these options. But when you're looking at those, it's not as easy as just saying we have $11 million of fund balance, so let's just use $4 million on a project, because there's that financial stability piece. So how is financial stability defined? It's defined by the state through a tool they call the financial profile score. Personally, I don't like the financial profile score because it doesn't take into account cash versus accrual, but that's a personal feeling. But anyway, what that does is it takes every school district and measures the exact same points to say whether or not they're financially stable. So our district right now is the highest recognition possible. So we're in recognition. Below that is watch. Below that is warning. And then you're in real trouble of state takeover after that. So anyway, when they're looking at this, they're looking at your fund balance to revenue ratio. They're looking at your days cash on hand, and they're also looking at your long-term debt versus your ability to have long-term debt. So in other words, how much debt do you have versus the availability? If you think about it like, I could get a $60,000 credit card, but I really and truly only will be using 5,000 of it. If you think about it kind of in a personal way. So when we looked at the fund balance options and realized that we would not be in a financially stable place if we used all fund balance, what that would do is reduce our fund balance to a level that is not comfortable. The state recommends about 3 months of fund balance, at least in your fund balance, and the district right now has plenty of fund balance, but even with the reduction of our fund balance of only the 1.8 that we're recommending tonight, that does put us very close to being moved from getting the highest score of 4 to a score of 3, just in this one area. They take all 4 areas to determine your overall score. But that is the only one that seems that it might be impacted. When we look at our days on cash, ISB recommends that we have 180 days cash on hand. The district right now has 260 days cash on hand. And this would reduce us to about 230 days cash on hand. So again, financially stable. And then as it relates to our long-term debt versus our ability to get long-term debt, right now, if we fall below the 50% mark, that's when we would receive a lower rating, and we will not, it looks like we will not even get close to that. So the long story longer, the finance committee, after looking at all of these options, decided to bring forward a hybrid option. The option of using partial fund balance as well as bonding. And tonight, we are lucky enough to have Eric Anderson here, who's gonna be able to come forward and discuss with you the bonding options that we have, more than just one option that we have, but ultimately the finance committee's recommendation as well. Any questions for me?
Maybe one of the things, just clear, we're quick before we go. When you thought about using the fund balance, why is it okay to use the fund balance for this project
yes.
compared to using it for other expenses?
Very, very good point. So fund balance is created every year that you have a surplus. So you may have a $20,000 surplus. Well, that accumulates every year to the point where we have a nice fund balance level right now. If you use that fund balance reserve to fund things like salaries, that's like putting your groceries on your credit card. If you think about it that way, you need your groceries every month. If you're putting your groceries on your credit card, you're eventually going to run out of room, right? If you can't pay it off. Well, the same goes for us. If we use our fund balance for salaries, those expenses that are reoccurring and need a funding source that will be there, we will eventually deplete our reserves, and we will actually deplete them rather quickly given our salary and benefit levels. So this is a one-time use of fund balance. I, as a CFO, always recommend the use of fund balance for things just like this. Something that's going to improve our programming, keep us financially stable, and also have the least impact on the taxpayer as possible. With that, Eric, you may have the podium.
Thank you, T. Thank you for covering several of the slides. So we'll be able to actually move a little bit faster during my presentation. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having me this evening. I'm going to start off by talking about my first slide, and I never do this except for the last couple of months. This was prepared on September the 14th. September the 20th today. It's just a mere 6 days. What's happened in 6 days? An awful lot in the finance world. And what I do for a living, and I've done this now for 29 years, we have more volatility in the bond market than we ever have. It's certainly in my career. So Anna, if you'd go to the next slide, and we'll go one more. And this is the state of municipal bond interest rates during the last 6 months. If we were to draw this back all the way to January, you would see each one of those lines, and this represents the 5, 10, 15, and 20-year rates for tax exempt bonds. This is really more an index, kind of like the Dow Jones is an index for the stock market. Very similar. So this is showing you that we have been largely on a one-way path up this year. We had a little bit of a decline in May. CPI for May came out, and boy, we just went right back up again. Things seemed to calm down as market participants speculated that the Fed was going to be done raising rates. And indeed, they have told us, no, we're going to have a longer period of higher rates in store. They meet right now and as well tomorrow. And at 1:15 tomorrow, they'll announce what their monetary policy is. It's expected it'll go up 75 basis points with about a 20% chance it goes up a full 1%. That's on top of 2 75 basis point moves in the past months. So next slide, please. Why are rates going up? Here's the reason why. CPI, inflation. We all know what we've seen at the gas pump, what we see at the grocery store, it's all translating into higher costs. And those higher costs, from an inflation standpoint, have really influenced bond rates upward. So right now, we're at 8.3%. You see a couple of dashed lines close out the year. Those are the guesses as to where the model brings CPI at the end of the year. In two of those cases anyway, number one is the highest CPI average in the last 20 years. That's last year. And the average CPI for the last 20 years. And that is shown as the mark that's 6%. And then the lowest, which is from 2008. You may recall that that's when we went into the Great Recession. And we, if we were to mimic that performance for the last 5 months of the year, we wind up at a 2% inflation rate. None of those look that great. Two of those are above the 5% mark that the district is entitled to extend as a tax increase. And that would be for levy year 2023. The Board of Education has a proposition before it at this year's levy to raise your taxes by 5%. Last year, we see that CPI was 7, you're limited to 5. And it looks like again, next year, you'll have that same consideration in front of you. So protracted period of higher inflation, we hope that it's ending soon. Thank you. Next slide, let's go one more. So T already talked about this pretty extensively. I don't think we need to talk about it too much more, other than committee and staff all felt that it made sense to blend the amount of resources that the district has. Both debt, so you can pay as you go, and then a cash injection, more or less a pay as you use. The highest performing units of government that I represent have a nice blending of both of these when they go to fund their capital projects. They're not reliant on any one stream. Most would love to pay cash for every one of their projects. That's difficult to do. And most would not want to pay debt for all of their projects. And again, you have a nice blending of the two here. The next page, we've got the composition. $2.7 million would be used for debt, and then $1.8 billion would be withdrawn from the district's various fund balances. And there's a couple of fund balances that we could contribute from. So it's a 60-40 split. We started originally off at 50-50, and we wound up moving more towards the 60-40. The finance committee, by the way, hasn't seen this particular output relative to the 60-40. This was their direction that they provided. So next slide, please. So when we talk about your debt, let's talk about, the existing debt first. We got to make sure we take care of that. And how is that structured? And then how would we structure any new debt? And what you can see here is that we're in levy year 2021 right now, of a slight increase next year, a stable levy for bonds and interest in 2023, and then a rapid decline where by the time we get to levy year 2028, we're at 0. So we go
Show them
from
the
2 million
totals
to
where you're
0.
talking, where they see the decline. So it goes from 1.7 million up to 1.9 down to 1.8, just
Yes,
so they know what columns that you're talking about.
right, the total bond levy column.
There you go.
That's a combination of both your referendum bonds as well as your non-referendum bonds. The referendum bonds, of course, a long time ago, they've been refunded back in 2015 specifically. And so this is the combination of all of the districts that's actually denoted down at the bottom in terms of what each is for. Next slide, please. And this is graphically representing what that looks like. And you can see the very significant decline after the 2 years, which are ahead of us, levy years 22 and 23, of a stable levy, albeit slightly higher than we are today. Here is your debt service extension base. So the DSEB, or debt service extension base, is essentially your non-referendum bonding power. This was established with tax caps. And what we can see here is that the district has a very generous amount of debt service extension base extension available in levy year 2022 of $895,000. Boy, we could make an awful big dent in that payment of $2.7 million of bonds by retiring almost $900,000 in year one. And we could do that. You as a board could do that. However, if we go back a couple of slides, Anna. Yep, well, I think it's just one slide. Note here in 2022, that 800,000 would actually, we would go off of this chart. And the total levy would be closer to $2.7 million, $2.8 million. That would put a very large tax increase onto the residents, on top of what is going to be a fairly large increase on the operating side from that 5% CPI for the operating side. So while it's available, we don't really want to use it. At least that's what the finance committee had indicated, because of the tax impact. So if we go, let's go back to that slide if you would. And so now we have the remaining landscape. I'll draw your attention over here. This is your headroom, as we call it. It's a difference between where your estimated debt service extension base would go to, and that graduates each year by CPI. And notice we've got 5% in each of the years 22, which is actual, we know that for sure, and 23, which so far anyway, it sure looks like we're going to have another 5, and then we move it back down to 1.5%, which is a little bit below where the average has been for the last 22 years since tax caps have been in place. So you can see over on that debt service extension base headroom side, we've got about $250,000 for 5 years. And then we have the full availability at $1.3 million and rising each year thereafter. And this is, by the way, only a 15-year schedule. You have the statutory ability to go out 20 years. So this $13 million, which is your principal and interest capabilities in that space of time, would actually be higher. So as I mentioned before, looks like we'll drop that 2022 levy because of the impact. So while it's available, I don't think the district will be taking advantage of that. The next slide. So when we take a look at structuring the $2.7 million, we'll use the $1.8 million as a fund drawdown, easy. The $2.7 million, how are we going to structure that? Well, we could structure that as interest only in the first couple of years. That would mean a tax increase to residents, or you could do what's called capitalized interest and actually issue more bonds, about $200,000 more. That money would be input and used to make interest only payments for the first 2 years. I think the next slide will show it a little bit easier. Here's the sources and uses of funds. So we've got the limited school bonds now at $2.9 million, the 2.7 plus 200, the district's contribution. So whereas it's a $4.5 million project, it actually rises with the capitalized interest of 4.7. This is the capitalized interest right here, and then there's the capital project deposit. Right now, we're using 350 as last week's rate. I think we're closer to 375 right now. Again, the Fed meets tomorrow. My personal speculation is the Fed will probably calm the markets a little bit, but that's what we're hoping for anyway. Next slide, please.
Eric, to clarify, but
Yes.
paying that capital interest first, that will do what for the taxpayer?
So that means that the district does not extend a tax increase whatsoever in those first 2 years for the bond and interest portion. And we're doing that, Dr. Myers, thank you for bringing that up, because we're really doing that because originally when we structured the debt that the district undertook for life safety projects in 2018, we looked forward and we said, when's the next time that the district likely be coming back to the market? We didn't anticipate it was going to be late 22, early 23. We thought it was going to be more late 24, early 25, when the next round of life safety comes about and other projects that might come before you that we didn't know about in 2018. It's coming a little earlier for consideration. And this is the method that we use to basically buffer the taxpayer from that impact. So here we are. Here's the initial two payments that are made. So it's an in and an out. This is rounding essentially. And you can see there that the debt service extension based headroom does diminish almost to zero. And then when we get past the retirement, the district has a very substantial complement of its DSEB remaining for the next projects. We mentioned life safety. We think we're in really good shape, life safety wise. So when that survey comes, it's a 10-year survey. We think that we won't have a significant amount of projects to fund. If that's the case, however, we do have an ample amount. So we're not leaving the cupboards bare, if you will. So that's just we have a couple of things we have to evaluate here. And so you're right, when there will be a quiz though, I don't know. But essentially then, let's go to the next page. Right, and so here is the total bonded indebtedness. So we have our non-referendum bonds, we add to our referendum bonds. That is the total amount that's extended to the taxpayer. And we can see what that looks like here, where we're really trying to keep those first 2 years level. And as you notice, we have a decline, just like your current debt service is shaped. Obviously, there's more debt to be paid, and so the taxes won't go down as much as they would if you didn't do anything. However, this is one way that you might look to structure the debt. This one goes out 14 years, may make sense. These are very low payments out here, and these could be collapsed, for example, as we show in option 2 on the next slide, please. That we just shorten this a little bit, raise those up, but still maintain the same type of decline embedded in your bond and interest levy. And so this one actually would save a little bit of money, lower rate, of course, and then the bonds are outstanding for a lower period, a shorter period of time, and that would then reduce the amount of interest expense. It also means that when you get to the future, you won't have enough as much debt service extension based headroom to consider, the next projects that might be in the road. We do have pretty substantial amount of headroom remaining though. And so that's somewhat comforting, I believe.
And Eric, when you reference collapsing some of that, would those also be callable? Or would we
And
make
yes.
them not callable?
Yes, and they would be callable as well. So this is a shorter schedule. This only goes out to 2031. Probably just the last 2 years would be callable on this one. The prior option 1, we would have the last 5 years callable on that one. So a modest amount of callability, but that does provide some flexibility for the district in the future. Likely, it wouldn't be a savings refunding opportunity, but rather a restructuring opportunity if that was needed.
Can you explain that? What is
What's
callability?
Callability means that it is optionally redeemable by the district. And so what does that mean? It means that you can tell existing bondholders on a date certain, we are going to buy those bonds back from you at a rate of par or 100%. That's typically, there's a lockout period, generally speaking, for between 7 and 9 years. And that's price influenced. If you want an earlier call, you pay a little bit more for it sometimes. When we take bids, we generally take as many as 3 different options and then run those by the district to see which one is the most favorable for you.
So that essentially means that the bondholders are guaranteed to make interest then for the period of time until we can call it back. Because if we call it, then we're essentially prepaying it so that they don't get interest for those last couple of years, if that's what it is. So it's basically a prepayment, no prepayment penalty.
It's a no prepayment penalty, correct, for the district, right? Because it's 100% efficient at the call date.
Mhm.
Now, it could be 100% efficient prior to the call date
But we still
too,
have to pay.
right? But that is, that gets into more complex, probably bonds 301. But nonetheless, yes, we don't want to remove flexibility. We want to create flexibility for the district to manage its money and its debt in this case on an ongoing basis. By the way, there's no ability for the investor to put those bonds back to the district. telling you, you have to buy them back from us. It is a one-way transaction. The district controls exclusively.
If we had excess revenue or excess capital, and we wanted to do that, we could do that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Here's the summary. We could extend that full debt serviceability in levy year 2022. I don't know if I mentioned how much that would have been. We talked about the $890,000. It's a $170 increase to a taxpayer. So that's a pretty large increase on top of what we expect to be a $237 or so increase for the operating side. So between the two, the finance committee said, boy, that doesn't seem to be a good solution. So we went to the interest only for 2 years. If you were to extend that, that would be a $22 increase to taxpayers for that portion of the bill. And if you were to abate those first 2 years with capitalized interest, then we're looking at that $0 impact, as we talked about it before. In all of those cases, the operating side still stays the same. But we're really trying to manipulate how the bond and interest levy interacts with your total levy. And then this schedule is a little busy. It's for the accountants in the group. But really what it does is it shows you on an annual basis. And these are obviously some guesswork in here relative to things like EAV and where your ultimate debt service winds up. But where the rate winds up being, and then how much is going to be taxed of the residents for either no action being taken versus this year, and then what that yearly change might be. So it gives you, what we do know is that under the scenarios, at least that we've advanced here this evening and with the finance committee, it will result in a tax decrease for that portion of the levy associated with bonds and interest, no matter if you choose option 1 or option 2. You send me back to do another option, happy to do it. But so far anyway, it looks certainly like we'll be able to, for that portion of the levy, have a lower levy going forward. Issuance requirements. We do have to adopt a notice of intent to issue working cash bonds. And then we hold a BINA hearing. That BINA hearing stands for Bond Issuance Notification Act. It's a hearing that you run basically for 5 minutes. It allows any interested party to talk about the borrowing. And you do have the ability to be petitioned on this, by the way, too. If about 1,565 voters would take out a petition, they have to be registered voters. They take out a petition, they sign it, and they present it within a 30-day period of time. And that could stop the financing under that type of approach. Otherwise, you're empowered to move forward. And essentially, as the last paragraph says, it's about a 45 to 60-day period from when you say go to when funds are issued, funds are received rather, and the bonds are issued. The next slide talks about the potential plan of finance. It could be as fast or as slow as you would like to go, especially if you don't plan to do any kind of levy for levy year 22. Right now, we would have to, if you wanted to levy, we'd have to get that on the books by the end of February. If you don't wish to levy, then we really don't have a timeline associated with it. It really is all when the Board of Education is ready to move forward. Any questions? I know it's a lot of information, a lot of data. But happy to answer questions now, or if at 2:30 in the morning you've got one, write it down, send it to T, go send it to me, and we'll get it back to you.
You all have my cell phone.
I think the takeaways from what Eric's saying is what was trying to be done through the finance committee is being mindful of our taxpayers, still trying to manage the project. Also looking at what flexibility that we could still have, you could still have as a board, not only in the short term, don't want to get a little tight, but I think what you saw towards the end, the long term also, what's the long term flexibility that would allow boards and future administrations to be able to still do those larger projects? And I think it's when you look at those options, those two options there were probably the best ones that we were able to present to meet those needs. So we felt it was probably the most flexible to be able to present those two tonight. And Freddie and Kevin, you've been participating in some of the conversations. If there's anything that you want to follow now or wait till the team. That's her part, we can do that too. But that was a takeaway from work from there. Hearing what we had, you know, they had some bigger levies coming in, opportunity presented, so.
Just comment, I mean, my head's spinning a little bit from all the numbers and everything, but the big takeaways that I got from you and Dave's presentation were first, just the incredible amount of benefits that are gonna happen for the students and staff. And that's at Carl Sandburg, that's at Lincoln, and I also see that benefiting the high school as well, because those students are just gonna continue to develop in those, you know, extra spaces. From the finance side, the big things that stood out to me were the ability to maintain financial stability. No or very minimal burden to the taxpayers, and then that flexibility that you mentioned too. And I mean, these all sound like great things to me, and I think it's something that we should continue to look into.
Thing that I like most about it, I've been through a couple of bond discussions like this over the years. And I didn't even know you could do this, but the 2-year paying the interest and not paying on the capital, which gets us 2 years later in the repayment process without raising the levy, keeping it. You know, because some of the bonds are retiring and then the new ones will take their place. So the idea of doing that to help everybody, help the district, the board, and then plus the people, well, all of us too, that are paying our taxes every year. I think it's a win-win. And the other thing I would add is that I think it's also going to benefit the community as well, Eric. People will be able to attend stuff at Sandburg that wasn't really possible before. At least in a better environment, in a better situation than going over to Lincoln City as well. Definitely.
Thank you, Derek.
you.
So just in summary, we discussed the financial or the fund balance options we will be discussing with bond council in terms of which funds we will be pulling those from. But the important thing to know is we had $5.4 million of unreserved balance, and unreserved means it's not already designated for something else. For example, a Fund 11, that's only our lunch service because it's our lunch program, federally funded. I can't use that money on this, right? So the fund balance options are coming forward. I wanted to say one thing about the bonds. Oh, the capitalized interest. So how do we pay for that, right? We didn't really address that. So Lake County actually takes our bond and interest levy, $1.8 million. I'll just use that as a round number. And they say, well, not everybody pays, right? Not everybody pays, but you still have to pay your full bond payment. So they levy 1% more than what our bond payment is. And then when taxpayers pay, if they pay the full 100%, there's a little bit left over. And that little bit left over accrues from year to year to year into fund balance, as well as when we have interest income in that fund. Those things all accumulate, and that will be the funding source we use for those two initial payments. Any questions?
Anyone have any other questions?
So which of the options on that table that was, you know, there was, which of the options was the recommendation of?
The committee. Option 1, with the use of $1.8 million of fund balance.
But what impact was that? Was that the one that had zero impact
The one that
to the
had,
taxpayer? Okay,
that is
So
our
it was the
recommendation.
last one on that chart.
thanks.
Can we pay the interest the first 2 years to get us to the point? of the use funds?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, sir.
I believe I have the next item on the agenda, which is the levy. It's levy season again. Actually, this district, we start our levy process about a month earlier than other school districts. We do that just so that we can get through the process before the newspapers start trying to flag everybody and print crazy headlines of asking for 7% increase. So we're going to address some of those questions right now and those things that the newspaper would generally highlight for other districts. So if we take a look at the next slide, our timeline is that we're bringing the levy estimate to you today. At the next board meeting, we would adopt the estimated levy, which is the proposed estimated levy we're bringing today. Then we would hold our public hearing and have the adoption of the levy certificate in November. And ultimately, the last day to file with your county clerk is the last Tuesday in December. Go to the next slide. What I love about this slide is showing us what has been happening to the house values in Mundelein. If we look in 2014, we saw just the lowest valuation of Mundelein in years. And what we have seen ever since is a steady incline. In fact, from 2014 till now, we've seen a 40% increase in the overall value of the homes in our area. That's coupled with what's called new growth. New growth are those new houses that get built or those new subdivisions that get built. One of the things that we've seen in the same timeline is our new growth go down. Why do I bring that up? One of the documents in your board packet looks like this, and it talks about the levy, just how it's calculated in general. I like to talk about how it's calculated because it has a it's one of those things that you can go up to your neighbor and be able to explain something to them that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily understand. So when they look at you and they say, my tax bill's going up $200, why is this happening? Number one, if you have a whole subdivision that say go together and they all fight their tax bill and that entire subdivision gets their house values lowered. The law does not say the district gets last year's money less some portion for house values going down. It still says we get the same amount of money. So how do we get the same amount of money if the house value is going down? Well, your rate goes up, but also the other taxpayers then assume the value that the original taxpayers are not paying. So at the end of the day, the district still receives the same amount of money either way. It's just important to understand kind of how that works. If we go to the next slide. So proposed versus anticipated. This is what the newspapers like to highlight. So I'm going to come over here and explain this a little bit. So what we have here is our proposed. This is what we're coming to you today saying we would like to, at the next board meeting, adopt this proposed levy. This proposed levy is an increase of about 7% from the prior year. If we look at this, this is a 5% increase. This is what we actually anticipate we will receive. Why would we levy, or why would we ask the board to approve a levy for 12.5 million when we only think we're going to use 12.3? Well, number one, this is all based on information and budgetary figures 2 years out. So I'm supposed to be able to say in our 5-year plan, this is our ed fund. And this year, this is how much we're going to spend. So we need to levy this amount. Well, obviously that information can change from month to month. So when we get from the beginning of this process, which is happening now, till the end of the process, which actually doesn't occur until March. So quite a few months down the road, that's when we actually finalize this. If I were to only ask for $12.2 million and I get down the road and I realize we need 12.3, I can only get 12.2. So what this does is this gives us, by asking for more than we anticipate, it gives us the flexibility to move between various scenarios, which we're going to discuss in just a second. If we go to the next slide. This shows you the impact. So again, what are we proposing versus what do we anticipate? Based on what we anticipate, we will see about an increase of $82. Now, Eric spoke earlier about $237. What you're looking at here is the house value of $100,000. Eric's valuation was a $300,000 home. And if you look at multiplying these, they're roughly the same figure. So just to kind of tie it back to previously, and this here is our bond and interest levy. So according to what we currently estimate, it would be going up $10 for this home value, just automatically happening without the changes that we're talking about making. If we go to the next slide. So again, we're coming to you with this proposed option. And when we look at our scenarios, there's actually a scenario sheet. It's, I believe, page 5 of your handout. It goes through and it explains if we have more new growth. So if we have more new growth, that can actually give us the ability to levy more than we anticipated, but if we don't ask for enough here. And again, this doesn't happen till March. In March, they tell us, by the way, we forgot to tell you, a new subdivision was built. And you're getting $2 million of new income, so, or new house value, so now you can levy all of that money, right? But if I don't ask for enough here, we can't access that, and once you lose it once, it's lost forever. And that's an important thing to talk about, is just the fact that you have to maintain these values and maintain the levy as a whole, just to make sure the district is continually getting the maximum dollars that we need for the values, but also asking for what we believe we need. We're not just plugging figures in here, we're actually using our 5-year plan to prepare the proposed levy extension. We go to the next slide. It's questions. Does anyone have questions for me? This page 2, the one that goes through and explains exactly how the calculation for the tax levy works in terms of PTEL and our tax cap. This is a great flow chart if you want to fall asleep tonight. You just take a look at it and you go through it. It will put you right to sleep or teach you how to do a levy. Either way, it's a win-win. Does anyone?
Would there be any adjustments to the levy depending on what the board decides next month in regards to the stage?
Regards to the stage, no, as Eric Anderson discussed, if we decide to do those capitalized interest payments, this bond issuance doesn't have to be on the books by February. So that does give us a little bit more time and a little bit more room to feel comfortable with the options being proposed and how we would like to move forward.
My only question is on the proposed, but it's a 5.1 tax cap anticipated. I thought we were limited to 5.
We are
Where does the
limited to 5.
5.1?
So why is it 5.1? Because of the new growth. We do have a very small amount of new growth and it is providing us that. But that is exactly right there. That shows you 0.1% we would lose if we didn't have that new growth. And if we don't account for that, we'll lose it.
So, T, on one of these, sheets,
Mhm.
you talked about it. It says total estimated increase $82.
Yes.
So we were talking before on one of the other slides, like $237.
Yes. How does that correlate?
So, yeah,
So Eric gave the value or the tax impact of a $300,000 home. I every year do mine based on a $100,000 home.
oh,
So if you look at that 82 and you multiply it by 3, it gets very close to Eric's
oh,
increase that he discussed. But you also have to realize that you're then taking out the homestead exemption 3 times, so it should be higher anyway. It's a lot of nuances, but yes. It passes the sniff test.
So my concern is the fact that the EAV for individual houses is increasing at an incredible rate, as you showed before, from 2014 to currently.
Mhm.
So while you say $82 for a $100,000 house, or $237 for Ray's house, maybe more than that for Ray's house. The $82 doesn't really take into account the inflationary pressure on EAV on individual houses.
Actually, it does for this scenario. So if we get, the slide shows that the house value, so what we do every time I present you with, this is the tax impact. I take the prior year, we're saying is the $100,000 home, and whatever happens to that home for that year. So if they're saying all value is going down 2%, I adjust for it. And based on the EAV estimates that are in this document provided by Lake County, we're expected to go up. So we use that slight factor to increase the house to then show the proper like taxes due, if that makes sense.
Sort of, except I can tell you that, let me just say this, this is last year and this year are, because of inflation, going up to the 5% because of the tax cap would mean that last year and this coming year that we would be larger increases than normal.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And my taxes have never gone up less than $237 in a year. It's always, and I'm not talking about everybody, I'm talking about Mundelein District 75.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm skeptical that somehow EAV is not included in that, accounted for in that, because my tech, that's typically. Not last year, but typically in a previous years, it's usually $300 on average, I would say.
And that
Yep.
could be back to those things I discussed where the homeowners get together, they fight their tax bills, and then that adjusts our rate. So that gets pushed out on the rest of the taxpayers. So that could be why you're seeing the increase as well.
So I would like to think about, I would like everyone to think about. As Eric talked about, buffering the taxpayer. With incredible inflation pressure. You know, groceries. Taxes. Gas. You know. That. I mean, you don't. Fall up there, but I would really like to see us not. Try to go to the top limit of 5% for the levy for this year. Just because I feel like everybody's under pressure. You know, just like we're trying to. Make the bond and interest payments not make that much of a factor of difference for people. We do the same thing with the levy. We can do 5%. And I think some school districts are going to do that and some villages are going to do that, but I would love to see us, you know, not go to the max. You know, so we're not on the list of, these are all the school districts that did max this year, kind of thing in the newspaper. But that's just my opinion.
Well, and one other thing, because I know it's been mentioned before, is that all the 5-year plans that get presented to us are all, assuming we're gonna use the full 5%.
Yes,
So then that impacts our long-term numbers. And as she's pointed out before too, if we don't ask for that, then we can't make up for it in 2 years when it's a better year or whatever, because we're still capped at that. And once you don't ask for it, you can't act because it compounds. But I hear what you're saying and don't, you know, like I said, we're not voting on it tonight.
Right,
And I
right.
hear, you know, what you're saying too, is for us to keep that in mind. And that's where I like hearing the different options so that we are trying to figure out how to take advantage of, you know, in some ways we have additional revenue, that then this is what we're talking about trying to utilize it for in a good position rather than just
Mhm.
increasing our expenses generally.
Mhm.
and maybe if I could give you an overarching idea of something we are trying to do exactly what you're saying, Kevin. We are actually in the process right now of setting up meetings. Eric Anderson's going to be there as well, but with the municipalities that all show up on your tax bills. To try to find a way to work together so that if they have ebbs and flows and we have ebbs and flows, especially when you see those debt service extension bases or debt service itself, that we can work together so that you don't see 7%, 7%, 7%. Or worse yet, you don't have, say, us coming out saying your tax bill is only going to go up 200, but because of, I'm going to use the high school just because that came to mind. The high school's bond and interest went up $100 and they don't understand that. So what we're trying to, again, do is come together as a group and have a unified idea. Now, this may not work. This is a new idea. I believe it was done once in Illinois. So we're just feeling this out and seeing what we can do.
Just want to follow up with something that Chrissy said. Remember when you do 5-year projections, don't you usually take the average inflation? You
I
don't do
do.
5%.
No, I will take what we estimate it to be. So I'll do a 5-year average, but once we get closer, like I already put in the 7 because we do that back in January. And because that came out in January, it's already adjusted my future years to be higher because that 7 has now made the average change. And the important thing to know too, this 5% increase is bringing us about $800,000, if I remember correctly. That money is also dependent to fund things next year. So if we don't get it this year, it will compound a problem for next year because we're relying on that $800,000 increase when we did our projections for negotiations and what we could and could not afford there, just to make you all aware.
Just to make a comment. Because I understand what you're saying, when you don't use it, you lose it. And you can't go back to it. When I was with the village, they made a decision one year. Not to do that, not to go to the written, it wasn't even the higher rate. And I tell you, it put everything in a turmoil. All the projects that were planned ended up being stopped You know, they're building the police department and the firehouses. They put everything on hold for about 8 years. We started in 1994 with plans to build that police department and didn't get it until 2001. Because it screwed up the whole process, because it couldn't go back and recover from it. So it took time to get money back.
Yes, and with the new teachers contract we have, I feel like we're very much locked in to what the increases are gonna be. What are the implications of the 5% CPI having on that contract?
Those were presented when I presented the contract itself, but I believe. as
Right, but
I
it-
recall-
but it
Oh, it
wasn't-
didn't have an impact on
But
the
it wasn't,
five-year
but
plan.
wasn't there like some sort of future years were based on what CPI was?
So future years, we have 2 years that are outstanding that we do not know for sure, and that will have an impact on the end result. So if that new CPI comes out at 5 or 7 or whatever, there is a stipulation in the contract that opens up certain increases to happen. So as that CPI increases, that also makes us incur more expense. But when we did the 5-year plan and when we went into negotiations, we ultimately came out with the percent increase that we could afford over that number of years that I presented in the 5-year plan.
Mhm.
So it wasn't that we said, we're gonna afford $2 million in the 5-year plan, and then after negotiations, now it's 5. No, we said, okay, if we need to be at 2, and this is how we need to be here, how can we work together to get there? And that's where we came up with those alternative ideas in terms of how we structure the
right.
the contract. Does that make sense?
But it's, because this year is the large increase,
Mhm.
then the next 2 years, there's no increase, right?
But if we forego the $800,000 increase this year, then we don't have $800,000 next year and $800,000 the year after that. And our 5-year plan is relying on that increase to fund.
The initial 5% one was one that we anticipated being able to have, sure, yes.
Right.
The increase is still gonna be the step.
Right, of course. So you say that we'll lose 800,000, but isn't the 800,000 going along with the 5%?
If we don't levy, like, so
Right.
anything you don't levy below
So-
that 5%.
so- Okay, so what's the difference between levying at 5% and levying at 4%? Of that 800,000?
I don't have that. I can look it up and I can definitely get that information and follow up with you.
Okay.
I can't do that.
It'd be stuff we'd want to have prepared for the next board meeting to present to everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
I would make one more comment. After they lowered the tax levy, not one single resident called the village and said, yay, thank you. Because they don't pay attention to them.
Yep, teaching and learning. Up next is the Tablet for a Month, teaching and learning, Brian Jenkins. Gives an update on linguistic programming.
Not everybody, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, hello, everyone. I certainly feel like a financial language learner after that last hour, so hopefully we could make it a little light and celebratory. We have amazing stuff going on in our linguistics programs, and I'm so blessed and fortunate to have with us some teachers. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Lillian Quint. I'm a 6th and 7th grade dual language teacher at Sandberg. I've been here for 17 years.
Hi, and I'm Brenda Juarez. I am a 4th grade Spanish dual language teacher at Mechanics Grove.
And Anais Diaz, 1st grade dual language teacher at Washington, and 9 years.
So the agenda that we have for tonight is just a reminder of some of the task force recommendations presented last year. And then additionally, the progress and the next steps that we have for each of those recommendations, and then some celebrations for the schools.
So I work with the Linguistic Task Force, initially started back in 2020, 2021. We were working alongside David Nieto. And through that work during that year, we definitely, he led our district into a whole set of group interviews where we did an audit, talked about what were our needs at that time, what was the consensus across the board amongst all of these subgroups, and based on those focus group interviews that he conducted, that led us over to make our goals for our linguistic task force moving forward.
Thank you, Glenda. One of the recommendations that we moved from a 50-50 to a 90-10 model. We introduced the 90-10 model last year and it's rolled up to first grade this year. We have 0 students choose to exit going from kindergarten to first grade. And I'm curious, Anais, could you speak at all about what you're
Yeah.
seeing with our first graders?
Definitely, having taught in both models, I can say, one, we're very proud of all our programming, both our 50-50 and our 90-10. We worked really hard to be able to build it up to be able to provide this model. What we are seeing is a lot more student engagement, and we have 24 days in school as of right now. Usually students are at this point of conversation in Spanish towards more the middle end of the year, but just being able to see them not being afraid to take risks in a new language or sharing of their language and culture. It's very exciting to see within this model.
In terms of next steps, we need to continue to support and provide guidance for our 90-10 model, as well as nurture our 50-50 model to ensure that students at all levels of our program are successful. Next slide, please. We continue to do that by providing language allocations for our staff in each of the programs, professional development for all of the programs, as well as celebrating the work that teachers are doing in our 50-50 as well as our 90-10 program. An additional recommendation was to develop a rigorous standards-based two-way dual language curriculum. We had a monthly release every month last year, including a dual language summer workshop at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, attended by almost all dual language staff, in which we developed really strong teacher developed units. And I'll let Anais speak a little bit about the units and how they are going with the students.
So if you go to the next slide, please. We continue to grow our programming, and it's been rolling up. It's been incredibly insightful and helpful to work along with our other peers as our programming is rolling up. We've been able to work with MG as well as Carl Sandburg, be able to add more rigor and integrate best practices for all our language learners. And again, we'll go into partnering with Adelante as well. But we're very proud of the work that we're doing together in solidarity with all our colleagues.
What's really exciting is that while we purchased the Year at a Glance, the year-long plan from Adelante, the teachers themselves took that plan and developed units very specific to the demographics, cultural, linguistic, disability needs of the students in their classrooms. And the teachers have really owned them. And I would, from my perspective, are pretty excited to teach them.
Thank you. That's all next to.
Next slide, please.
Here's the year at a glance for Sandburg. And as you can see, we have aligned our ELA monolingual units with the Spanish language arts units. And this year, our focus is on writing. So students will be practicing the 3 writing modes: narrative, informative, and argumentative, in both languages throughout the entire school year. So we're excited about that.
Exciting in the middle school level is that in both English and Spanish are doing all 3 writing modes, as well as we worked very closely with dual language teachers to ensure as much articulation and collaboration with their monolingual ELA peers, as well as creating as much articulation and collaboration with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade dual language colleagues in order to strengthen the instruction curriculum development.
And to be able to facilitate the collaboration.
Thank you. Next slide. additional recommendations were that we enhance our instructional practices, which we've done through our curriculum release days, which included professional development also on SIP days. We're leading out linguistic and culturally responsive trainings during new teacher orientations, institute days, as well as during staff meetings. In terms of next steps, we are continue to partner with Adelante as well as have a lot of our in-house professional development in terms of practice, instructional practices, and we can look at the next slide.
Yeah, so our relationship with Adelante, I think, has been, I would say, like life-changing for the district. I can tell you that. I've been with the district for 4 years, so I can talk of my experience. When I initially came in, I came in as a new teacher, like many new teachers come in, right? You come in asking questions. What is our program model? What do we stand for? What's our framework? I came in as a 5th grade teacher. So if I'm teaching 5th grade, where have the kids been? Where are they going? And at that time, as an experienced teacher, I was just asking these questions. And a lot of times I couldn't get clear answers. And in a sense, it was, well, we're all doing what works for us. And what worked for everybody was different, right? And so finding that common answer and like common consensus was hard, right? And so we bounce off of each other. But then later we start a relationship with Adelante, and now you have Amy Mosquera and Marilyn Refusal, who offer that guidance. What they've really done, I think, amongst the 3 buildings is like they've built a common language. They've built a common background for us. I can tell you today in this room, I was here with Lillian, it was 4th through 8th grade teachers. And we're getting this professional development on the common language of like, what is the foundation of a dual language program? What should it look like? What should be there? And despite being in different grade levels, how do you adapt it, right? So like it flows out. And so I think that I can say that when we talk amongst our dual language teacher and we show up to our meetings, like the feeling is different, right? Before there was a weight on there with common questions, and the weight's still there, right? It's the daily stress of teaching, but there's more consistency across the board. And that's definitely one of our biggest assets, I think, that we've grown from this process. And I know Ryan's going to go deeper into this, but we have a relationship as well with, I forget her first name.
Yeah, we'll go into that in just a
Yeah.
second, but it is
So-
exciting, the professional development that we're doing with Adelante this year. The focus is the curriculum that we built last year. How do we take best practices in language instruction in English and Spanish? How do we build bilingualism and biliteracy through oracy practices? And that is and how do we take the curriculum and now best implement the curriculum through instruction? And that's what we're working on this year. Next slide. We were tasked to prioritize professional development in the area of multiculturalism, bilingualism, effective strategies for literacy development, and curriculum development. We have partnered with Adelante for the last 3 years to develop our curriculum and best practices in dual language instruction. This year, we're really excited because an area of need that was identified in our program by students, by families, and by teachers is best practices in Spanish language, literacy, assessment, and instruction. We found a guru who's the author of Rooted in Strength, Dr. Laura Shenzi Moreno. She came in to provide us guidance and adaptations on how to adapt formative literacy assessments, so Fontes and Pinnell, EDL2, for our bilingual readers in order to maximize instruction afterwards. We have also started a partnership with the Illinois Resource Center with Carly Spina to implement a co-teaching model in grades 6, 7, and 8, meaning that our identified English learners are included in all of the gen ed classrooms with additional support from a language specialist. And internally, myself and Mrs. Drake have really took on Spanish foundational skills and language framework development, as well as best practices that we're embedding into our units in order to strengthen Spanish language instruction in our dual language units. Next slide.
So here are some examples of our teachers during our different professional development opportunities. So here on the left, this is a picture from our new relationship with Ms. Moreno. And that to us, I think this year is definitely adding a lot of strength to our program because she's really walking us into a different approach of looking at formal assessments from a different lens, looking at it a lens from like a dual language learner. Because we have been getting these assessments, but it's always become the question of like, so I assess the kids in English and Spanish, what does that mean? So now it's understanding how we can use that data. And then the other ones are also just pictures of us as well in Reach and all of those other professional development opportunities.
And we're promoting what we're doing on Twitter. So you see my Twitter out there. I think, and we're doing that in order to really elevate our district in terms of we really have a premier dual language district. A lot of what we're putting out there into the world is hopefully to attract future dual language educators, as well as to retain and support those and celebrate those who are in our program now. Next slide, please. And so at the dual language workshop last year, during June of 2022, we asked the teachers how they felt this year after a year of these program improvements versus how they felt the previous year before that in 2021. And anyone here, could you speak in terms of how you feel?
Well, last year was very challenging for all of us because we were learning a new curriculum for the ELA portion of what we do. And then we were creating units for our Spanish language arts without a curriculum. So that took a lot of time. Day in and day out, no weekends, trying to find resources online. And it was hard. However, we felt supported by the administration. We supported one another. And having had the opportunities to meet once a month and not work in isolation, because our profession is very isolating. And when we didn't have any curriculums, that's what we did. We all did what we thought our children needed. But it was, I think we're better together. When we plan together, when we work together, we get better at our craft and everybody benefits. I feel like we're growing very fast. I'm proud of the work we've done and that we're still doing. We were here all day today, creating more lessons and having more professional development. I'm very excited about the fact that Adelante is taking a more active role and they're helping us create the SLA units, which is a huge burden off our shoulders. Because it takes so much time even to find resources. But like I said, we're growing together and learning together and everything is, a work in progress. But we feel supported and thank you for everything you do for us.
Grateful to be part of the team, and I do think this is a good segue into the next slide. Is the next recommendation is that we self-identify as a dual language district. So I would say that in all departments, being dual language and culture, equity additionally from the Board of Education down to is quintessential to what we do, and collaborations in each and every one of the departments reflect those values. And additionally, to enhance our vision of multilingualism, multiculturalism, and equity. Again, this is at the forefront, at the core of what we do as a district. And moving forward, we're going to continue to engage with the Dual Language Steering Committee, as well as all the departments to ensure that we are not just a dual language district as a facade, but at the core of what we do. Next slide, please. So just as an example, the entrance way to the district office administration center is where you see multilingualism represented, multiculturalism represented. This is the first place that any new transfer student, as well as anybody coming into this building, sees. That is also our MundelineSchools.com website picture. We had the dual language recognition there for 5th grade to celebrate those that are moving from 5th grade to our 6th grade, our first year of 6th grade dual language two-way program. The Dual Language Steering Committee worked together to establish vision, mission, and if you scroll down a little further on the D75 website, we believe statements that are crafted in both English and in Spanish. Next slide. Oh, and I guess I think I should ask you all, how do students feel about being dual language educators in your schools? Or dual language students in your schools?
You know, I think I'll speak on that. So I think when I think of our dual language program, well, yes, our instruction is in English and Spanish. I think that across the board, something that's like really beautiful is embracing the fact that like when we say multilingual, it's not just an English and Spanish world. In reality, our kids bring in all these other cultures, right? So like we constantly, I know in my classroom, I use the word trilingual because so many of them bring in their Polish background and their German background. I can't tell you, I have a student that constantly wants to teach us his German words that he knows, right? And he like, I think our dual language program also extends more into bringing diversity into the classroom, and diversity isn't just a Black and white Spanish English thing. It's also extending out to how do you bring that diversity that our community has, and I know we'll get into that later, but it's really an extension of that. You are who you are, and you're part of Mundelein, you're part of a district, which is a reflection of our dual language program.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Glenda. Additional recommendation was to develop protocols and guidelines that articulate the dual language program. Again, you saw the published mission, vision, and we believe statements. I've organized the identification and notification of EL's processes throughout the entire district, as well as state reporting that at Lincoln School, which is a new practice for us, which would hopefully increase some of our Title III funding. We, in collaboration with the registrar and Mrs. Drake, we've supervised the kindergarten dual language placement process, and we are happy to say that 100% of students who registered before the first day of school who opted for dual language were placed in a dual language kindergarten classroom. Next slide. So on our dual language website, we do have the presentation explaining our dual language program. We have the clarity in terms of how you enter in the dual language program, as well as lottery, key dates to ensure that you get into the program. And I'm building now in collaboration with administration, how to enter the dual language program as a newer transfer student from another district, which has been an area that we would like to have a little bit more clarity. Next slide. Additionally, it was recommended that we complete an inventory evaluation regarding literature and other Spanish, and I would say multilingual resources, which is through a multilingual curriculum, classroom libraries, guided reading in both languages, and our school libraries. And Glenda, how do you feel about the Spanish, and that you can go to the next slide on it, but Glenda, how do you feel about the Spanish language resources that have been provided?
Okay, so I can extend on that. So we've had a relationship where as far as we've been purchasing books from a company called Books del Sur. Actually, this company is based out of Illinois. So it's someone that began purchasing authentic Spanish literature. She then started selling to teachers, to districts, and now she has this big library that we can choose from. So I think for us, it's been very instrumental. I know that we had discussed that previously. Our classroom libraries did have books in Spanish. Yes, they were there. Were they engaging for the kids? Maybe not always. Maybe the cover isn't as engaging. Maybe the text doesn't connect with the students that we have in our classroom. So through Ryan and through our district and our teachers' work, we've been able to extend that relationship with Books del Sur, where we have this nice little document. It's an ongoing live document that we're always referencing, because anytime we come across a text through Books del Sur, and there's also Custom Ed Solutions, which is another company based out of Illinois, where we can also purchase books. We're constantly coming back to this document because we're constantly revisiting. Do we need to bring in more text for our students? Is it just for our classroom libraries, or is it also for like a mentor text? So we're going back to how they mentioned that we're working on our unit plans and lesson planning. We're also constantly revisiting what text we're using. Is it a reflection of our students? Is it helping us teach the standards we need in both languages? And so this document is constantly evolving as our relationship is with the vendors.
Yeah, just like our buildings are constantly evolving in terms of what we need for the programs we need, we continue to purchase additional titles to support the curriculum based on best practice and to reflect the diversity of our students. Next page, please. Additionally, we are tasked to review hiring practices as well as establish and strengthen partnerships with institutions of higher education. We have a partnership with National Louis University, including an MOU. What's kind of exciting about the MOU for future hiring practices is it enables us to sponsor a visa for international candidates, if that is something we would like to pursue in the future. We have expanded hiring in the multilingual/EL department. I like to call it multilingual instead of EL as asset based, but everyone's trying to pick up to remember that term. And additionally, we expanded hiring to support their expanding dual language program. And we are super excited to say that we had 0 vacancies in any of our bilingual, dual language and or EL positions at the beginning of the year. Next slide, please. So we hired 23 new staff this year. Look at all their pretty faces here, 10 of them in the multilingual/dual language department. Here you can see Jamie and myself. Jamie's up there. At the job fair, we had participated in several job fairs, as well as we had National Louis come to us to promote some of their programs. So Lillian, I'm not sure, you work with quite a few of their newest staff, or Anais too. Can you speak in terms of who we've hired?
Yes, that's one of our celebrations at Sandberg. We hired 2 amazing teachers, Nick Gaona and Jermaine Whitney. She is our 6th grade dual language teacher, and Nick is our 8th grade dual language teacher. They're amazing. They have a passion for teaching and for kids, and it's very evident, and they're proficient in the Spanish language. But beyond that, they're also very familiar with the Latin culture. Nick is the son of a Uruguayan. That's where I'm from, so I'm a little biased. And Jermaine lived in Ecuador for a while, and they're very passionate about the Hispanic culture. And it's just, they have been amazing. And just the fact that we are able this year for the first time to have the time in the morning to collaborate as a team. Once a week, I meet with her, 9th period, we're both off every day because she's new to dual language and she's so eager to learn. It's just exciting, what can I say?
Thank
You
you.
know,
Thank you,
to
Lillian.
get people with passion and heart, that's why our children,
And keep the ones with passion and heart too.
yes, let's keep them.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Additionally, that we are tasked to establish a family committee for the dual language program. We have a BPAC that operates in conjunction with District 73, District 76, District 120. We additionally locally in our BPAC hosted 2 events last year, Dia de los Muertos, our Day of the Dead, as well as our multicultural fair. Exciting about our multicultural fair is we had 18 different countries and ethnicities represented, so not just Mexico, and we are with our dual language steering committee. Last year, we decided that our biggest area in need was family engagement. So our dual language steering committee, following the guiding principles of dual language education, will be prioritizing family engagement in terms of our progress and work this year.
And so I'll speak a little bit on this. We as dual language teachers, we can't teach just the language. We have to teach the culture. That's part of our passion. That's part of what keeps the spark alive in dual language. And our children thrive when they see themselves represented and when they see this, when we are able to value them as well. And know that we value them and care for them, and not only them, but their families as well. We've had the opportunity to provide a platform for our parents to be able to share their cultures, their customs, their food, their vestuario. And it was unbelievable to see all our families represented, not just our families in the dual language and our dual language programming, but as an invitation to everyone in our district, whether monolingual, bilingual programming. I can honestly say, and I know we feel a sense of pride to be able to call Mundelein our home, but for our parents to be able to feel seen, welcome, and be able to share with us and for us to take a step back and learn from them and see the power that they bring to our community.
Thank you, Anais. So just as a reminder, this will be presented by Mrs. Ehas and Mrs. Samantha at the November meeting, that in the dual language, we continue to collect data through using the same systems that they use in the monolingual program. So I'm going to go through it really quickly. So we collect STAR 360 data, and it specifies here in K1 English and Spanish, and STAR 360 second through fifth grade English reading and math, Spanish reading, and STAR 360 in grade 6 to 8 English reading, Spanish reading, English math. Next slide. We also look at the students' proficiency at literacy proficiency in both languages, with the goal of our program being bilingualism, biliteracy, and multiculturalism. We're really hoping for students to be proficient in both languages, but we are aware that some students are developing quicker in one language versus the other language. Okay, next slide. We additionally do the Fontes and Pinnell in English in grades A to Z, Spanish level A to N. This Fontes and Pinnell doesn't exist in Spanish after level N. They always say it's going to be published next year hasn't arrived yet. So we are using Evaluación del Desarrollo del Lenguaje, which is a very similar system. Next slide. And then some celebrations for the school. We don't have anyone from Lincoln here, so I'm excited that we're now doing the full identification, notification, state reporting for identified ELs there. We've developed a multicultural library there through the teaching and learning department, and we have facilitated multilingual and multicultural PD. Next steps are just auditing internally what we have at Lincoln to ensure that what we have reflects the demographics of the students there to provide the best English language support. Some of the cute kids in our TFA, in which they're learning some Spanish as well as some English. All right, next slide. And this is Washington.
The Washington celebration, quality dual language classroom libraries. We continue to build this with authentic text, not just translated copies. Another celebration, we've developed and taught dual language content integrated literacy units. Again, we are integrating what Glenda explained back into our units that we continue to build on. We've instituted Spanish-based foundational skills scope and sequence. This is particularly very exciting because this is helping build those foundational skills that our students will need as they move on. And we're seeing that students can read very fluently. And so we are excited about this. We've integrated best practices of Orton Gillingham into our Spanish foundational skills. Again, this goes with our phonics program in English, but we're coupling that with Spanish in a more authentic way. And a huge celebration is the strong desire from all to elevate Spanish throughout the building. You'll hear Spanish being spoken out throughout the day. Even our monolingual counterparts speak to us in Spanish, which then their classes, as they're walking down the hallways, are talking to our classes, oh, wow, like, you know, and so it's very exciting. It feels very welcoming. It's a good feeling to have in the building, just validation and representation. Next steps for us, continue to grow multilingual classroom libraries, continue to develop instructional practices and materials within Spanish foundational skills. That's something that we continue every single year to solidify it. Update Spanish collection and other languages in our school library. Again, we want everyone to feel represented, not just the Spanish, English, but also all our languages that we represent in our school. And then we're continuing to find ways to elevate Spanish and cultural diversity. And this is a collaboration from all, not just our dual language teachers.
Thank you.
Now, these are some authentic texts that you can find in our school library. So it's available to all students, not just our dual language program. Here we have a classroom library up there where children are able to choose
Spanish books or English books, hence the colors, green and blue. And just build their identity as a reader, as a bilingual, multilingual reader. And then we have some of our wonderful kiddos right there.
Thank you, Denise.
And then as far as our celebration for Mechanics Grove, now that we have more of a consensus across the program, now we can build fluidity, right? So a lot of, you'll notice that some of our celebrations can be back Washington because now we're able to continue the work. So one of our first points was retaining highly qualified staff. As we mentioned, all of our positions have been secured, and I will highlight like some of our staff strengths that we have in our staff as well. I think this year, one of our new teachers is actually in 3rd grade. And I think she's a great reflection of our students in our program that are native English speakers that are growing up in an English household and learning a different language, learning Spanish as a second language. She grew up here in Illinois, lived in Argentina for many years. Now she's back here in Illinois, and now she's one of our classroom teachers. So I think that's one of the things we mentioned, like that's cool because we are a reflection of the opposite reality, right? So we're very proud to have our staff, and also we're also regularly building our classroom libraries, as we had mentioned through our relationship with Books Pursued, Customer Solutions. We mentioned library dump days. That's like a MG word that we use at Mechanics Grove or at the beginning of the year. That's children in all classrooms, monolingual and dual, have an opportunity to look through the books and see what's there. Let's reorganize, talk about genre. So there's that consistency. We're trying to build a love for reading and literature across the board in the building, regardless of language. Year 2 of unit frameworks, like there's that saying, I would think of like in dual language, we jokingly say you're building an airplane and flying it too. And we're constantly feeling like that. However, it's year 2, so we have the structure of the airplane. Now we're just fine tuning it. So that for us is a celebration because now you can focus your work on how do we make it better. And our oracy and language development, as she mentioned, they're working on building the foundations of Spanish phonics. And for us, it's a celebration because what was happening was the kids were coming up and they had these like phonic instruction going on in lower grades, but it wasn't carrying on to the upper grades. And so how do you continue to build them as a writer? That's one of our big initiatives that we have through, or in Gilligan, through, they're actually receiving the phonics instruction in English. And then we use Dictado, which is an approach to teaching phonics and writing skills in Spanish. So that for us is a celebration as we're building that. And we also across the board in all 3 buildings are working on reading and workshop models. So teaching students our mini lessons, become independent readers and writers, and carrying that through. And consistent collaboration time among our dual language teachers. I think that at times that was hard for us to have a common time, especially because you have some teachers that are 2-teacher models. So when do I see my partner? If I am a 1 teacher, when do I collaborate with everyone else? So this year, we actually have the opportunity where we have our specials at the same time. We have a 50-minute chunk where we can meet together and work together. And it doesn't always carry on, as Lillian had mentioned, into your weekend and other things. And of course, our partnership with Adelante that we hold on to very tightly. Our next steps is continue growing our classroom libraries, as well as we also want to increase our Spanish inventory of books in our Discovery Den, which is our library. Currently, our collection is quite small. So when we want to encourage our kids to read Spanish at home, the options are sometimes limited when we take them to our library. So we want to increase that inventory. And we are going to continue developing our Spanish grammar because that is really our heavy focus, which is tied to the development I mentioned. So alongside with Ryan's guidance, we have a ton of resources that we have purchased now. We just have to plan it out and carry it through.
Thank you, Glenda.
And then here are a couple of classrooms. Here on the far left, this is a magazine. It's called Ahora, where the students are reading. It gives them up-to-date latest news in Spanish where kids can engage in that type of text. Then our anchor charts across the board will always be a reflection of the 2 languages. However, if you walk into our dual language classrooms, you'll notice consistency between monolingual and English classrooms as far as like reading workshop and writing workshop. What do readers do? What do writers do across languages? So that's, I think that we're working on building a culture across in our 3 buildings of like a dual language environment. So we want our school to be reflective of learners and know that it's a dual language program, right? across the board, as well as a mixture of monolingual classrooms. And so the other ones are just classroom settings and a classroom library.
Thank you, Glenda.
Mhm.
And Lilia.
So at Sanford, we have very similar celebrations and next steps as Washington and Mechanics Grove. But I would like to add the addition of co-teachers now in ELA and math classrooms for our ELL students. What else? Something that you guys haven't mentioned. Well, the partnership with Adelante, now we have them coming to our classrooms and co-teach with us and model lessons and strategies. So I'm really excited about that. Mallory is gonna be there tomorrow morning and she's gonna help my students and she's gonna help me conference about their writing. So I'm really excited to have an extra set of eyes and hands because my classes are very, very big. And we also have the additional PT with Laura Asenji. Regarding our next steps, we at Sandburg, we really need to increase the number of multicultural and multilingual books in our school library. We have a few selections, but they are translations of books that have been written in English by American authors. We need to purchase books that are in Spanish or they're in English but written by minorities and multicultural authors. We also need to find additional ways to elevate the Spanish language. We have, for example, for the last 2 years, we have been saying the pledge in both languages. We have created signs that have a behavior guidelines in both languages, which is nice. That's new this year. But we need to find other ways, like for example, the announcements in Power School. Maybe we should translate them into Spanish so that the parents can read them, those parents that don't speak English, or the street signs. It'd be nice to have one of those big electronic signs that, you know, have messages in both languages back and forth. Just let the community know that they're welcome, that we see them, that we're including them. And we're excited about continuing to roll out the dual language program throughout our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Thank you, Lillian.
Yes. Ryan and Adelante were there last week. That in the red t-shirt, that's Nick Gaona, our 8th grade dual language. Here, it's Jermaine. And that's me reading a mentor text the other day to show our students a good example of what, you know, a memoir should be. And there's a picture of our book room where we house all our guided reading activities. That's it.
Thank you, Lillian. And that's it. Preguntas, any questions for us? Thank you so much for the staff.
I have a quick question. With Sandburg this year doing the new ELA social studies model, where now ELA is 2 periods instead of being all 3 to include social studies. Is social studies being taught in both languages, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Social studies in the dual language program is taught in Spanish.
Okay.
We are piloting a new Spanish curriculum that was selected by the social studies teachers. But because in order to teach social studies in Spanish, we need to ensure that the curriculum is also in Spanish. So Jill Unger, the teaching learning department, and myself are working with the social studies staff to work towards the instruction of social studies in Spanish in the dual language program. Yes.
Have you had any feedback from the community and or parents on the first year of the 90% model? Like obviously
Can I
this is all
talk to
great.
this?
Oh,
No.
okay, there you go, perfect, so.
So I have a first grader and a kindergartner, and they're both in the dual language. And I actually was going to share the story that, in my mind, I was like, when are they going to start talking Spanish in front of me? And I don't understand it. So the other day it happened and they were making fun of me. And my husband, who understands Spanish, was in the other room and just started cracking up and saying that they're calling you a crazy teacher and saying that like you're not making any sense or something with what I was telling them. So I was honestly very impressed with how much my first grader has learned in the past year. And the fact that my kindergartner is already at that point, I'm like thrilled with it. Yeah, so thank you all.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing.
I was gonna ask you, you talked, and it's clear that there's passion with with you putting this together and with the dual language teachers. With the students coming back after COVID and being out and what everybody was going through with that, now coming back into school with the dual language program on top of that. Can you just kind of hit a little bit on how the students are reacting, how they're accepting the noticeable, like Emily was saying, noticeable progress being made?
So we know that the pandemic had an adverse effect on our students, even more adverse effect on our primary students, and even more adverse effect on our language learners, because through Zoom, it's really hard to structure that environment. So knowing that we have students in 3rd and 4th grade and beyond who didn't have that foundational Spanish language, that is why probably in all of our next steps, all of our PD, all of our goals, we've narrowed down Spanish foundational language is really what our staff needs to support these students, what our students need to reach the goal of bilingualism and biliteracy. So that those are really have set our goals in the dual language program to support Spanish language, oral language, oracy, and literacy instruction. Additionally, at each of the buildings, we have a bilingual reading interventionist. That's a new addition at Carl Sandburg, who's able to support, you saw the matrix I showed of the English and Spanish reading proficiencies, who's able to provide additional support in Spanish language or in English literacy. So those are the ways that we're trying to address that.
Can I also speak in addition to that, with the partnership with Dr. Asensi Moreno? It's seeing it from an equity lens, seeing assessment and seeing the way we collect formative data in that lens. Because what we often see is, so students who are more comfortable in English or whether it be Spanish, take off in one language more than the other. But what we are working on is to be able to transfer those skills that they have a strong foundation on into the other language. And so being able to have this partnership and help strengthen programming.
Thank you, Anais.
So I have to say thank you for the presentation. I mean, personally, very impressed with not only the presentation, but again, the passion that you folks are displaying is just phenomenal. So the information that you provided us, I think is very, very helpful for us. The thing that really struck me when we first started, when we started talking about the 90-10, I remember a year ago when we first started talking about that and how is that gonna work, where's it gonna go, and here we are doing it. So my hat's off to you, thank you very much, very impressive.
We've been working, and I mentioned this to you, I feel like we're growing very fast.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of the work all of us are doing together as a team. We have never worked and collaborated the way we do it now. And we're growing really fast and we are becoming better at our craft and the way we support each other. We have a lot to celebrate, we really do. And the way our kids are learning, here it is at work, your children, it shows that the program is working. This early in the school year. And they're already feeling comfortable using the language. That's beautiful. Too comfortable.
Yes. And I think one thing across the board too, like as a teacher and her and I, we grew up here. I can tell you, my parents immigrated from El Salvador in 1980. My family was one of the first Latino families here in Mundelein, and we've resided here ever since. And we all work here, my siblings and I all work for the community in one shape or form. But I will say that growing up here, I know I'm way up there in my years with like much experience, right? But I would say like, thank you to administrators and thank to you as well as a school board, because I don't think our program and our community could uphold the program that we're striving towards if it wasn't for like all of these hands on deck. Because I'm coming from the perspective of a Hispanic student that went through the school system, and I know what it was before. Not that it was bad, but it wasn't that diversity and that open to cultural diversity. So
And I
I
went
think that
to,
it's
and I went to Carl Sandburg too, and I often talk to Mark as well as how I felt as a student, as opposed to now being able to, you know, provide this sense of validation and validation for our students. But even as a teacher 9 years ago, when we first started rolling out the program, I can honestly say like now, like having so many of our colleagues come together, be able to come together and bounce off ideas of each other. And again, having the support of our administration to provide those resources has been something that like something that we can't replace. Like when we're stronger together, we're better for our students. And so, thank you.
Just even when you show up to Sandburg and you come into our classrooms and you talk to the kids and talk to me, and the way you celebrate who we are and elevate all of us and show how much you care and how much you value what we do in our children. That to me, it's been invaluable, and I so appreciate you and what you do for us. And the impact we have on our community. I showed you earlier, I had a text from Gary Soto. She's a senior at MHS. She used to be my student when I taught Heritage Spanish at Sandburg. And she says, Mrs. Quint, I have some news for you. And I was here and I'm like, can you text me later? And I am at a meeting, and then she couldn't wait. And she's like, I got a 5 on my AP Spanish test. And I wanted you to know. She was my student 4 years ago. These children know we care, and the impact that we make stays with them for a very, very, very long time. So I am proud to work in this district because I know that we do wonderful things for our kids in our community. Sorry for getting emotional about that.
And just to
That's
echo
very,
some,
that's very significant, and I'm gonna tell you, it's not just what's in the classroom, because it carries over into the home. And then it ultimately carries over into the community. And when we can make changes in the community, bring people together, just like you're doing in the classroom. That's very powerful, very significant.
the goal is collective efficacy, the goal is collaboration, the goal is us all working towards the same goal, and that's from the Board of Education to the community and everyone in between.
I just want to say thank you again for all of your passion and all your hard work. I know that the development of this has not been easy, but clearly there's a lot to celebrate, and clearly the passion and excitement is there. I had started keeping a tally of all the times you said you were excited, and I had to stop because there was so many, and that's just incredible.
The work
Yeah.
we've been putting in, and it's ongoing, you
Yeah.
know, we're always tweaking things and collaborating, and we did a first run and this didn't work. Let's sit down and see how we can make this better. But we see the program working, we see the progress with our students. We see the excitement and the pride. Our students were not always proud to be who they are, to be a minority in this country, to be Hispanic. And I see within the last couple of years, there's a change in the way they feel. about themselves, and what better gift can we give them than celebrate who they are? And we're doing every single day.
No, Ryan, you had mentioned at some point in the presentation, wanting to be the premier dual language district. And I just want to share with everybody at the last CEDAW board meeting, I met a woman. She was a stand-in for another district. I believe it was 34. Once she found out that I was from District 75, she wanted to ask me about the dual language program. And it turns out she works for the book distributor. And she said, I can tell you're doing something special just by the libraries that you're developing. I thought that was cool, someone from, I think it was District 70 or 34, somebody from a different district, was aware of what we were doing and had positive things to say about it.
Thank you. Yes, I attend Literacy Squared with Jill Unger once a month, where we visit other dual language districts, administrators, and we are doing amazing work. We're not perfect, we're growing, we're improving, but we are on the pathway to becoming a premier dual language district.
Like, we've taken a couple of trips to Bolingbrook to Custom Ed Solution. It's a beautiful place. So many books. We spend the entire day there searching for books for our students. It is just, it shows that, what we value and the hard work that we're doing. And I don't know, proud to be here.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for
Yeah,
your
thank you.
presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Cindy and Laura, want to take us through the paraprofessional compensation discussion?
Yes, we're done. Okay. So we can't have this conversation without first telling you about our paraprofessionals. So the parapros that work in our school district are invaluable. They're invaluable to support our students. They're invaluable to support our teachers, and they support the culture of our buildings. Our parapros throughout the day do so many things that are hidden and that aren't seen. So our parapros do things where they help to manage behavior, functional skills for our students. So you may see a parapro circulating in one of our general ed classes, helping students stay attentive, or making sure that they caught the directions that were given, or helping them just stay in their chair, right? You may walk through the building and see our parapros taking our students on different movement breaks, walks through the school, pushing heavy carts to try to get some of that muscle exertion out. You'll see them taking them into our sensory rooms in each of our buildings so that they can get the input that they need so that they can be their best selves when they're in their classrooms. You would also see our parapros helping academically. You'll see them circulating in classrooms, circulating in special ed programs, being able to support our students, but also you'll see them sitting in small groups teaching. They co-teach with our teachers so often. And then many of our parapros have also taken on other responsibilities, such as managing health needs. So we have some parapros that are tube feeding, some of our students with feeding tubes. We have parapros who are being trained on different lift techniques for some of our students that have more motor challenges. Being able to help our students who are still needing assistance when toileting, things like that. They are managing, and they are the heart and soul of so much of what we need to be able to keep our students successful and going in our schools. So you need to know that before we talk about the next part. So Cindy and I took over hiring paraprofessionals in the 1920 school year, which was the year the world shut down. So we as a school district have had at least one paraprofessional opening in this district since October 8th, 2020.
At times, that has been up to 11 openings. It fluctuates. Currently, we have 7 positions that remain unfilled. 2 of them in my buildings that I manage, MG and Sandberg, are 1-to-1 positions for students with very significant disabilities. And because of that, legally, we're responsible to cover that. So we are having to pull from the sub pool to be able to cover those students' needs and make sure that they're supported throughout the day. Since October 8th of 2020, we have conducted 53 interviews. Every candidate that has applied, come through different sites that we have been given their application, we have interviewed. Since the end of last school year, we have offered positions to 21 people. 12 of them have accepted. 5 of them, as they accepted, inquired with me about more money. In those conversations, most of them were asking for $1 more an hour. And then 8 of them have turned us down, citing specifically pay and taking other parapro jobs in neighboring or other school districts. So one of our ongoing difficulties is the amount of resignations and turnover that we have. So in the 2021 school year, we had 15 resignations. So we had 15 parapros leave. 6 of them cited pay as a reason for leaving. We are losing people to things like other industries. We had somebody recently resign to work at Kohl's. So I've lost to Kohl's, Starbucks, things like that, because they need to support their families. And it's a very tumultuous time right now for many people. In the 21-22 school year, we lost 11. We had 11 resignations, 5 of them citing pay as the reason. It's important when you look at the number of resignations that you also think about how much time it's taking to retrain people. So it takes about, on average, 10 hours per parapro when we hire a new parapro to be able to get them trained and up to speed with what they need to do. Some of them take even longer. Some of our parapros need months of training to be able to support our students. And when we have these resignations, that's a tremendous amount of work for our staff to be able to keep the turnover going. In addition, the amount of time, yeah,
How many do we have total in the district?
great question. I think it's,
Because I don't know if 11 is a lot or not
I
very
think
many.
it's 34 total.
Okay.
A lot, yeah. Jamie, did somebody just respond?
It's roughly 34, 35
Yeah.
is where we've been at.
Okay.
Yes, 35. Yeah. There's 30.
Hi, guys. Okay, in addition, it's a tremendous amount of work to be able to keep these interviews going on a continuous basis. So Cindy and I are averaging about 5 hours a week, being able to call people, get them scheduled for interviews, then the reference checking, then the onboarding, answering their questions when we make the job offers and the things that they need to know, hooking them up with HR to be able to do those pieces. And that's a lot. We started way back in the 1920 school year. We would assemble a panel of teachers and we would have people come. We can't even keep up with that for the amount of time and the amount of energy that we're putting out. So now it's Cindy and I, and we put on our best smiling faces and we try to welcome them into the district. But there's a tremendous workload in trying to keep up with this turnover and the amount of need that we have with our students.
So we asked HR to help us out and pull from the neighboring districts to kind of look at where they were at with starting pay compared to where we were at. So you can see kind of on the low end, it's $12.65 to a high end of $12.49 at Round Lake. And we were kind of in the mid here with some of the districts being more than us and some being less than us. And based on the feedback that we're getting from our paraprofessionals, that they were asking anywhere from 50 cents to $2, mostly wanting at least $1 more an hour when we talk to them. We wanted to propose, go ahead on for the next slide, that we increase our base salary for our current professionals hourly rate by $1.50. This will bring us up to beginning
range of 1650 to 1875. Some of the things that they get a little more on that higher range is if they're bilingual and for years of experience and for education. They're closer to that 1875. If they've got some experience. If you have no experience and you know, no college education and you're not bilingual, you'd be at a 1650 an hour. Kind of pay rate. And then trying to keep our paraprofessionals, we wanted to look at something to examine that because we're also seeing that high rate of resignations and kind of the cycle forming. And so we wanted to do a retention bonus that we'd like to give all of our paraprofessionals hired prior to March 30th of the previous year, which will be this year at the end by March 30th. That then the following October, we give them a $750 bonus. Also looking that they didn't exceed their absences, personal leave. We can kind of tell when somebody's ready to resign, all of a sudden, you know, all those days start being taken. So we don't want that to happen. So we wanted to include that as part of it as well, to really give an incentive for our paraprofessionals to stay with us. We too might cry, just not out of joy, but frustration. They're so valuable to everything that happens in our school system. We just can't speak more highly of our paraprofessionals.
So. Let me ask you two, maybe three questions. So when I look at the chart with the pay. Last year, we approved an increase of pay, and at that time, we were like the high guys. And everybody's passing us up.
Yeah.
So that's a significant point, I think. But you explaining what a paraprofessional does, so let me see if I got this right. If there's no paraprofessional in that classroom, then you have to do what the paraprofessional does to accommodate what's going on.
Yeah, we have
And
to,
while you're doing all of that, the students are sitting there waiting for you to come back so you can continue teaching them.
yeah, so the lead teacher has to try to, you know, stop some of the
Right.
classroom instruction to manage some of the
So
things
it
that a
creates a
paraprofessional.
big void.
Kind of a ripple effect. We also have to pull people. Yeah, you know, every morning we're playing like human dominoes, like, okay, we gotta cover here, we gotta cover there, we gotta cover this. To try to stay in compliance with all of our needs that we have.
Because the paraprofessional minutes are, you know, it's by law. So if it's written in an IEP, we need to meet that by law.
So at what point do we get, when teachers are getting so frustrated because there's no paraprofessional there, that they start leaving? And now we're creating another void over here.
I mean,
So if we don't think this through, we're gonna potentially create, perpetuate a bigger problem in the district.
you have that
And
bigger
losing
ripple.
consistency and losing the ability to be teaching the students. I mean, we just heard everything that was going on in the dual language, for example. So for them to lose all their momentum, to lose all their consistency, to lose the passion. I mean, it's kind of like
Mhm.
we need to see this through the right way.
Ray, I'm glad you mentioned that ripple effect because I have pairs in my classroom and I rely on them every single day. And when one of them can't be there, that ripple effect is huge. Somebody gets pulled from somewhere else and then that person is impacted and it's very real.
Any other questions for us?
Is the retention bonus something that the other districts are doing as well? Or is that something that we want to do to stay?
Do we? ask for
Jane, are you familiar with other districts using a retention bonus?
So what we're trying to do. Situation unique, because we recognize that we may not be able to compete dollar for dollar with some of these other districts, but we're looking for some return on investment by the training. And so there are other districts that are exploring this, but we are ahead of the curve in offering that as an. So I think we, in my opinion, absolutely need to pursue this because number one, the parents deserve this. They work really hard and they have such an impact in the classroom. And then number two, that ripple effect that we talked about. I guess my only concern is that we have seen this problem in the past. And we've tried to solve it the same way and we're just trying to solve the same problem with the same solution again. I don't have an answer to that. I just want to make sure that it's something we consider.
Although I would
Thing
point out,
is that it's not just trying to attack it the same way. I mean, it's being attacked the same way. Because right now, that's the only viable solution there is. Because, and maybe Dr. Myers can expound on it a little bit about the thought processes that have been in play with the school administration, talking through, trying to develop, and trying to come up with new ways and new solutions.
and I was gonna say further that the need to increase wages is not unique to paraprofessionals and in this particular thing, especially in the last few years where labor shortages are key. Wages across the board, not maybe in a linear fashion, but are increasing. And so everybody else is having to then increase in order to compete for that same labor market. And I think that it's indicative of the problem that she mentions that, people are leaving to go to Kohl's and that doesn't mean that Kohl's doesn't deserve labor either, or that Starbucks or whatever does. It's just that it's just indicative of all of them. I mean, in a lot of ways, and I know it was mentioned to us before that, with legislation that's coming to, the minimum wage is starting to rate where in a short period of time, the $15 we're at now is minimum wage. So we're trying to get ahead of that to still be, because as minimum wage raises, so are all the other wages. So we do have to keep in pace with that. And I don't think that it's out of line. It would be unusual if this were the only thing that needed to be incurred, among everything else and everything else is staying static. I think we can see in other markets and everything else, this is just the trend of what's happening now in order for everybody to compete for this, and because these are very important. Not that anyone is more important than another, everybody's important, but this is how we support staff, and the paraprofessionals are not part of our certified staff that are part of the negotiations team and everything else. So it's all related, and this is how we do have to make sure that we're meeting our needs with our obligations, for IEPs and everything else. And while we have to meet those needs, we want to make sure we're still supporting the staff that we have, because if we're pulling their paraprofessional to meet the needs of, to fill the IEPs, then we're leaving those in a lurch. And I'm being told by a number of people who have left the district and everything, that there's a lot of reasons why people are leaving. I think money is primarily, and, resources, maybe another. So we certainly don't want to create a void in one spot and not another, but while I see the point that we have raised it recently, I think we're just trying to keep up with the market, and unfortunately, that's like everything else. It's just going up.
Even though they might have a passion, you have a choice nowadays to earn $15 as a paraprofessional and then go somewhere else and make $17 an hour. Probably gonna go for the 17.
I'll speak to it. I work in an industry that is paying these exact same wages. They're not paraprofessionals, but they're in this exact same bracket. And there's just a couple things I will take away. One, and we have talked about it in the past. Maybe we can do something to be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive, because the last couple of times we just react to, we have a lot of vacancies, we can't keep up with other neighboring districts. I understand that, right? We have budgets to abide by and we gotta take care of our community's money. So that's one. But two, I like the retention bonus. There's an incentive there to stick around. It equates to, depending on how many hours or how much you make, to about a week's worth of pay, right? So there's, something there for them to get. 1650 puts us at second, but I think one of the big things from our industry, my industry. Like the passion that the teacher showed earlier, in the previous presentation. That was amazing to see. And I think we do all acknowledge that we're in a great community, but maybe some type of recognition too, right? Making it, it's not always about dollars and cents. I've realized, I've been in my industry for 20 years now. It's about, how do we show the employees that we care for them? Some type of recognition program. So just, I guess, just throwing that out there as a challenge to our administrators.
Yeah, we do
the team.
recognize them annually, but we certainly could think about doing something more frequently.
Correct, yeah.
And I have reached out to the College of Lake County, to the academic advisor for the early intervention program there, trying to recruit students that are going to school to be future teachers, and so that maybe they could be a paraprofessional and take their courses. If we could get it to match with their coursework, that could be a relationship we could foster. So we're trying other things to really kind of keep our momentum going also, but love ideas. We're open to anything.
Can I ask a question? On this topic related to the personnel report. I noticed that none of the paraprofessionals we're hiring are starting at $15. Is there a reason for that?
They would have met criteria that would have placed them higher on the entry level scale.
Okay.
So do they bilingual, do they have college experience?
Thank you. Anything else? Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the things I learned tonight is that I'm not gonna have my report go last anymore. Cause I don't wanna follow up on either of those. Two items under the section I'm responsible for. So the first one is the board does need to select who they'd like to have as their delegate, represent them at the III conference in November. That person's responsibility is to share on behalf of the District 75 board, the resolutions that you would like to see promoted more from the School Board Association. In your manila folders, you should have a hard copy of those resolutions. And I believe we did email them to you. Did we email them on?
Yes.
We did. Also have an email copy as well. You'd want to go through those and bring what you want for feedback and have that discussion at our October meeting. But right now, we need to identify that person B. Christie has historically, at least the last 2 years, been that person for us. But we want to make sure though that everybody else has that opportunity to be able to have that fun experience if they so choose. And wanted to open that up for your discussion as a board. So looking for a person, and you can probably describe the process.
Right, so essentially, if you are the delegate, you do not get to go to the 10:30. Probably 10:30, it says until 12:30, it usually goes more than that. Or maybe I think it says to 12 and it usually goes well beyond that. So I think you miss like 2 slots of things that are going on throughout the
Gonna say
day.
the presenter for my 1 o'clock workshop didn't make it 'cause she
Right,
was still left up.
it's, yeah, you usually miss those slots in the middle of the day, and sometimes there's really good ones you want to attend, so. I have indicated, so I got to do it my first year, and then the second year was virtual, because we didn't have it. And then I did it last year, so I'm willing to do it again, but I am not insisting that I be the delegate. If somebody else wants an opportunity, by all means, I will give it up to you, it's fine. I don't care either way. I honestly don't. It's an interesting experience. You basically, you go through all of these. We will talk as we've done in the past. We'll talk about these. We'll go through it. The board will vote to sort of indicate that to the delegate what avenue and how we would like you to vote. Ultimately, it's up to the delegate to vote along those lines. The first year it was done with hand paddles, where you're in a huge ballroom and they're in rows and they're going by and counting if you committed to it or not. It usually starts with a lot of very passionate discussion on all of the pieces, because each school all of the school districts have the opportunity to bring forth the resolutions, and we had the opportunity a few months ago to submit stuff. Then their committee sits down and goes through it, and then they go through and recommend that they adopt it, recommend they do not adopt it, or recommend they do not even present it for various other reasons. And there's a number of those. Some of the ones that have been highly contested and discussed in the last few years are now in the here again, but on the do not even present because they've already been presented enough times, they haven't passed. And unless you get past 2/3, we're not even talking about it. That's what I gathered from this, but representatives from those districts or the representative from each of those districts is usually the one to stand up at the mic and talk. They get so long to do it and then eventually someone says, okay, we've heard enough, let's just vote. And that's why it takes a while and can go on because sometimes people want to hear and it gets very passionate. Angry. Now, I mean, ultimately, you know, what a lot of people don't understand is the whole point of the delegation is really just to have those in the room who still represent rather small number of all of the IASB delegates, because not everybody comes, vote in order to tell IASB how they should spend their legislating and lobbying dollars. I mean, so we're not passing legislation, we're not doing anything, you know, of real consequence, which sometimes people don't quite understand when the press releases pick up that we're all voting for something. That's not quite what it is. But it's interesting and it's a way, you know, as districts, we all pay dues and we all deal with that with IASB and it does, you know, present all the school districts, you know, there is lobbying money to put behind some of this and this helps formulate, you know, where that goes.
So I nominate Kristen.
No, I mean, like I said, it's interesting. If you really want to attend a lot of the other things, you probably don't want to be the delegate. I don't care. You do get points towards the master leadership member, whatever, and you know, occasionally they add up and then you get recognized with an award or stand up or whatever at the things. I don't care. So you know, if anyone would like to have an opportunity to do it, I am more than happy to have you do it. If no one else wants to, I'll do it. So it doesn't matter to me.
Anyone interested? Okay, Christie, you're in.
All right.
You love
Voted yet.
Yeah.
Not the official action, but.
Good job, Ken.
Alright. The second item for us to go through as a board is both school boards had requested more information about looking at a different format for being able to conduct the superintendent's evaluation. Last week, the Shared Services Committee met and they went through some options. What I was able to provide were feedback from surrounding superintendents. Pretty much everybody did the same thing as what we were experiencing with paper or some kind of a Google form, filling it out, doing it once a year, or some not even having their eval done. What did come about is an online version that is being sponsored by the Illinois Association of School Boards. It's called Super Eval. And we had their rep meet with the group, talk through some of the pros and cons of it. I think some of the things that we heard about it, which I think would be an option for us to do. It still flows pretty much with our same process that we do. But I think some of the advantages that happen with this web-based program is the flexibility. I think is probably the biggest key. Where I'm able to go in after we've identified the goals. We can pick by the standards that of the priorities of the goals that you want me to focus on that we'd agree to. And then I can go in on real time. So it's September, I could be putting things in there that demonstrate that skill is being worked on or done. And then when I have that filled out, I'm able to click on the button and it sends it all to you to say, hey, Kevin has this part complete, you can look at it. What that allows you to do, I think, is more flexibility for you as a board. You can go in there when you want, you can kind of set your own timelines. But it also allows us to do one of the things we've talked about is to have a more informal evaluation process happen prior to December. Because we don't need to make it as lengthy. So what we could do is a midterm with this one, everybody's getting the information out, it's collating everything. So everything for feedback that you put in those sections, that's right there. And what it does is it gives you an immediate feedback sheet. You can talk about those different things. I'm able to update stuff in real time for you. So it's more immediate as opposed to us waiting more towards what traditionally school boards and superintendents do. You wait to the very end. I still follow that same process. It's just instead of me putting it in the computer right away, I'll put it in a Friday update, or what I'll do is I'll put it in a piece of paper and I put it in a folder. I gotta remember to share this with the board come in May. So I type it in to give you that booklet. So what we would suggest, and Kevin was there and Eric were there to share with what we were doing, you can share what you thought about the process. It seemed both boards were in agreement to do that. The cost total would be $21.95 for both districts. Split it, so it'd actually be just under 1,100 each to try it for 1 year. So that would be the recommendation tonight, and Eric and Kevin can share kind of what the discussion was during the shared service meeting. If there's anything you wanted to add, please.
I thought from the evaluator perspective that just gonna make things easier to read and more in real time. It's a living document that we can reference and you know, in the face of any kind of turnover, I think that that's gonna really be a benefit to, you know, if we had new board members join mid-year, they'd be able to reference this stuff instead of having to wait until, you know, the end of the year and read the, you know, the report that's given. It also made me think of one of the statements in the shared service declaration here. In the unity of purposes, it mentions we want to perpetuate a positive district culture that survives in the face of board member and staff turnover. And I think this tool is something that really supports that because of the consistency and the structure that it provides.
I don't have strong feelings. I mean, like Kevin said, it's very similar to what we do already. I think the District 120 board was a little more not unhappy, but frustrated a little bit with their evaluation tool. So I think they're really excited about it. So I mean, we could, like Kevin said, we can try it and see. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fun. So
Will it be easier for you as you go through it, or is it about the same?
I think I'd want to experience it. What I've heard from my colleagues, they seem to like it better. So instead of having to try to remember stuff and forget it, they like the fact that they could do stuff and just make it part of the regular weekly routine or whatever it would be. So I think it will help in the long run. Save some time, hopefully.
Because obviously, I'm just, I mean, the more we can free up your time to be doing other things that are more productive than, you know, not that your evaluation is not important, but, you know, obviously if that frees up hours, then that obviously makes the cost worth it. And the fact that we can share it with the high school district is obviously a benefit to both districts as a shared services arrangement. It doesn't sound like we're being asked to sign a long-term contract on it. So we try it for a year, and if it doesn't work, then we reassess and do something else thereafter. But
See, that was one of my concerns too, is just the amount of time, because as nice as the platform look, you know, it does involve a little, you know, a little bit more clicking around on Dr. Meyer's part here.
and I should be clear, not only Dr. Meyer's time, but Anna's time. I want to be mindful of the fact that I recognize that that's part of that.
I can't speak at all to what it feels like to actually do it. But I can just share information from the presentation. This came from, it originated in New York, and there are currently over 300 school districts that use it in New York, and over 52 that are using it in Illinois. And of all those districts, there's a 96% retention rate where they're renewing it and wanting to continue doing it. So take that for what it is.
I mean, the press policy and all of those types of things that come out of the ISB have been worth the money, I think. So, you know, it's something to consider.
Okay. All right, that's it for my reports.
okay, next up is committee updates. First one is board policy. Section 5.
Did Freddie want to finish up any of the things for
We
the
didn't
finance?
finish.
You didn't get to,
No,
okay.
because we were doing all
It's,
of the
you had a lot to do.
auditorium
Yeah,
stuff, yeah.
that's fine. I think we can, I mean, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time going through the intricacies of this, but I can, you know, kind of just fly through some of this. So we are on the 5th section of our annual review here, which includes operations, safety and security, general personnel sections. And a lot of them, you know, a lot of them are based on statute, you know, with some of the things we have to do as far as awareness and prevention of child sexual abuse and grooming behaviors. I mean, there are things that we have to do. Facility management and building programs. There's all the standards you know, the different trainings and the things that have to do, again, a lot of these are established by others, so these are. Not, I mean, there's probably some tweaking we could do if we really felt strongly about it, but a lot of these are fairly set, and I don't know that any of them.
Well, I will say that the ones you're referring to are still section 4, and that's kind of right up my alley, right? Because I'm in the janitorial field. So I was just gonna make sure that we're doing some of these things, like as a school district, we have to make sure our vendors are using certain chemicals and have certain training programs. So I have those questions already for T and Dave, like when we do our next policy update. So.
Okay.
But then it is pretty straightforward, to be honest with you.
Right, and I'm absolutely interested to hear, you know, if you have any questions for. It, you know, for Kevin or the administrators for him to ask, then. Do you want to go through any of them specifically now in your questions so that he can write them down and get through them, or did you want to wait till next time? Either way is.
I don't have them like on me right now, but
Okay.
as I was reading through them, I had a bunch of questions. And
Okay,
highlighted stuff, so I was gonna wait till our next finance committee one, but I don't have to, I can just email them to
Or
you
you
and
can
T.
email them to me.
I'll email them to you and T and then send them over.
Okay.
Cool.
we're obviously interested in. What you have to offer and bring to that, because obviously not my area, so. One thing to note, in the 4150 facility management and building programs, I will note that the naming of buildings and facilities, we have a policy on that, so. Should we decide to proceed with the stage building and decide to name it, we have a policy on how to do that at a committee that has to be named and or formed to do that, so just so you know, it's in there. Should that be something that comes down to it? You know, same thing, I know some of these, like in 4160, environmental quality of buildings and grounds, pesticides and coal tar sealants. I know some of these were recently changed in the policy when we did the press plus. Some of this having to do with statutes and things that were passed, you know, to update some of this, lawn care, you know, I know. As a parent, we on a regular basis, you know, we'll get a notice, hey, by the way, they're gonna be spraying pesticide, you know, so these are just the notices and stuff that we're having to do. So I know that we are complying with a lot of these because I get the notices. Excuse me, and I know I asked about the coal tar sealants when we did that the last time, because since we now do that ourselves rather than outsourcing it, because that was one of our things, you know, we talked about that and that's set forth in there. You know, there are standards for like I said, the awareness and prevention of child sexual abuse and grooming behaviors. So we have policies in there to deal with the program, or how it's, you know, how to report it, warning signs, and how to train the staff on recognizing it. It says the superintendent designee shall implement an awareness and prevention program, and the program will, and it sets forth the all training employees, educating students, and obviously we've got things in place that do that, and if they notice anything, what they need to do, and that all parents have 5 days, are allowed 5 days notice to opportunity to object to any of the curriculum that they don't want their children to be a part of that. They have that ability, and I know that's been sent out by the district recently for various things. Safety and security, setting forth the school safety drill plans. We do, and I know we just recently went through the annual review that's required by this section, where the board packet, I want to say it was last month, reviewed for the previous year.
6 months, yes.
Yes, all of the trainings and the Alice trainings and everything that had been done in that prior year. So this shows that we are complying with this because we just recently did it.
So can I interrupt?
Yeah,
just for a minute?
of course.
So one of the things, and maybe I'm not sure what his role is, with Cleora.
Yeah.
He's like
Brett?
chief of security. So when you read through the safety plan, the safety drills, drawn up them, even going further on, like if there's an emergency closing or preparedness for pandemic. Doesn't mention anything about chief of security for the district. And it seemed to me that there should be some indication of who he is, what his role is, and how does he play that. When you look at the school safety drill, it mentions that there has to be a meeting with the fire chief, the fire marshal. But it doesn't say anything about the law enforcement side of it. And there's legislative mandate that says that law enforcement be involved, that law enforcement draw up these plans. So I don't know, maybe we should look at that and see if there's something that we can do to incorporate the chief of security for the school district into the policy and identify what his role is and what he's responsible for.
I guess that's something for the superintendent to respond to, but it does say the superintendent or designee shall develop and implement the following programs. So one could argue that he's the designee, but because the superintendent may not be the one doing it, he's designating the chief of security. I know that the chief of security, that's a new position that we pulled in, so whether or not it has to be in the policies or should be are two different things, but whether we want to incorporate that in, I guess I would leave it up to Dr. Myers to, give us his input on that, whether he thinks that needs to be. I wouldn't want to tie it into that, since that is a new shared services position, that what if we decide down the road to change that or deal with that? I don't have a problem with it either way. I know that it says, like when it talks about, the superintendent designee shall develop, implement, and maintain the following comprehensive safety plan that does at least the following, and it goes through and says at least one law enforcement lockdown drill to address the school shootings and stuff. So it establishes, I have no problem if everyone else wants us to put that down as a note in order to make that update in our Google sheet, to work with the head of security or whatever the title is.
So I would advocate that we leave the policy as is, because the intent of the policy is to help the board give direction to me for what to do. In the description, kind of read what I hear you saying with that position, head of security, that is my designee, that's who I'd want to go to. And part of their job description lists down what they're doing with the different crisis forms and what they're doing with the safety drills to make sure that's all done. So to me, that's kind of the chain of command of what we have in place for one another to do it. And it's being consistent with what's in the rest of our board policy, because there's certain things on there that says superintendent designee. I'm going to Shane for HR stuff, but it's certainly Shane's role, or if it's the principal's role, that's who I would be working with directly. So I think from a policy perspective, that's addressing it. I think we are doing that the board doesn't see. What I think you're communicating, Ray, is the responsibilities for that role. And to me, that's all in the person's job description. That we're able to have that satisfied that way.
And I can just share too, having gone through the presentation and District 120 just this past week. Mr. Cleore led the entire presentation for the Alice training and all the safety procedures. So he was very much a part of it, very much involved in presenting that and organizing it.
As a board, what do we think about Ray's suggestion, though, to mention the position in there as in the policy part of it? Or do we think we need to?
Even if we change designate to security, just that one place, at least people know then who's responsible, who they should go to. Because if the superintendent isn't here and somebody else is looking, then designate. And when you look at all the drills, school safety drill plans, 3 school evacuation drills, 1 bus evacuation, 1 severe weather, 1 law enforcement lockdown. They have all those Alice classes that are going on. So even if we just, instead of designate, identify.
We define who the designee is, either a security member or.
Saying who
You do it for that, but then you gotta do it for everything, because that's throughout the
Right.
whole, everything, even our finance ones have superintendent or designee, even though the designee is T, right? So then, and we didn't change that language.
And the only places in all the policy where we list a person is where we're required by law
Right.
to put who they report harassment to, who they report
Correct.
things to. And because we're required by law to have that in there, then we do, not because we necessarily are naming everybody. We're just reporting like who the reporting to go to. But in these instances, I don't know that the public like needs to know who is conducting it, because it could change based on job description, based on various things that go. No, I don't have, I don't know that personally, I don't know that we need to change this part of the policy to name that, but I'm also, it's not a hill I'm gonna die on. I'm not against it if everyone else wants to do it, but
Neither am I, I'm just.
yeah, no, yeah, I'm just
I don't wanna create-
sharing my opinion. But the rest of this section, a lot of it just has to do with statutes, So for goal safety, that's because there was a statute one time that said that, not because we don't want to talk about football goal safety. It's just because, well, we don't have football in our district, but you know what I mean. I mean, some of the stuff I think they have to put in there because state law allows, we have to put in unsafe school choice option. We don't have other schools in our district to transfer a middle school child to, so that doesn't probably apply, but we still have to have it in here by statute. Just trying, going through more from an educational perspective, again. 4175 talks about persons prohibited to be on school property without prior permission. So I guess it's interesting to note that, and it's good to know that we have a policy on it. That even child sex offenders who are on the registry are allowed with prior school permission to be on the premises for attending conferences if they are a parent, to discuss his or her child's academic or social needs, participating in child review conferences, which evaluation placement decisions may be made, and attending conferences to discuss other school issues. So they have to get permission from the superintendent, the Board of Education, or the designee. I wasn't, until I read this policy, I wasn't aware we had a policy on this, not that it would have come across my purview to know this, but I guess it's good to know that it's there, and I guess it's just a question. Because I know if you're trying to be a volunteer in our school, you have to submit to the background screening and the license check and everything else. I don't know that we really do any sort of check on the parents that are coming in for conferences or anything to know if anybody's complying with this or not, because I don't know that that's generally, nor am I asking to say that we should, putting all of our parents through background check to come on campus. We don't, but that's just interesting to know that is in here. It does say superintendent shall develop guidelines for managing presence in school if they're doing that, so. I mean, the fact that we do have during the school hours anyway, we know we have, locked vestibules and everything where people can't be there without signing in and being aware from the school's perspective. So I mean, we have that element of control, but I don't know if you feel like that needs to be addressed at all. I'm not saying that it does. It just wants to be. For 180, this one underwent the pandemic preparedness and health safety protocols. This one recently underwent some changes in some of the previous press policies for obvious reasons. I think we made some changes to it based on a lot of things, this, I think it's pretty up to date. We've all had some practice now. Remote and, remote learning day plans, a lot of that has changed because of everything. So at least we have that in place. While we are not, we don't have actual, because we are not a one-to-one district to put that into place and do that, but that's, what we've already previously discussed. 190 targeted school violence prevention program. Again, this is all that was just really by statute saying that the superintendent designee shall develop and implement a program to deal with all of this, and not sure there's a lot of changes as far as personnel. We've got the equal employment opportunity and minority recruitment policy that we had previously discussed and made some changes to. I remember Lisa asking some questions, and I think we updated that a little bit when we did one of the Press Plus overhauls in the past year. Kind of bringing that, asking some questions and bringing that up to speed. So I know that has been looked at in the recent past. And in this one, this is an example of, is what I was mentioning earlier, that where it says the superintendent shall appoint a non-discrimination coordinator for personnel who shall be responsible for coordinating the district's non-discrimination efforts. So we've named who the non-discrimination coordinator is for this, because you know, it said that in the complaint managers, so that people know to whom to direct their complaints, should they have them. And interesting to note, we do already have a part of our policy that talks about minority recruitment. I know that that's mentioned as a goal within our equity policy that we recently passed, but that this is just bringing it all together and showing that we do already have, and we already did have some of this as part of our policies, but you know, our policy brings it all together. Again, workplace harassment. It's a lot of that is set out, and non-discrimination and complaint manager and coordinator are all previously listed, and those have been updated. And that sets forth the investigation process for those complaints and how it's going to be enforced and put into place, and what recourse people have. You can see all of the statutes if you want to go look at all the case law and where all this came from in your spare time. Hiring process and criteria. Again, we on a regular basis take a look at job descriptions that get brought to us to amend, so we're aware that this is looked at and is amended as our administrators are bringing those to our attention to update that. It sets forth how investigations would go and what we can require or not require as far as examinations, etc. Same thing with compliance and Fair Labor Standards Act. And a lot of this is dealt with, dictated by statute and our collective bargaining agreements. Communicable and chronic infectious diseases. Again, this has been overhauled a little bit and discussed in the past, because obviously some of that, as you can see, it was adopted March 17th of 2020. Good timing. As it were. And then like along with personnel, you know, we've got all district employees, workplace e-cigarette, tobacco, cannabis prohibition, drug and alcohol free workplace. How that would all go through. What policies we previously set forth, so I don't know if we need to go through. We've got policy on expenses and how the reimbursement of travel, meal, and lodging expenses are dealt with under this policy. As we can see, I know at the last board meeting, we approved the all of us to go, who, you know, those of us have signed up to go to the ISB, those things have to be approved, and that's an example of using this. And how the rest of the staff deals with, you know, it is under these policies that we had previously set, how that goes. I didn't have any particular insights to provide in detail. And then we get into some of the exhibits, which we have previously, the last one is the exhibit, which oh, I guess that's part of the code of conduct, which will be next.
Okay, thank you. Next up is finance advisory. I think we talked about everything previously. We talked about, right? Right. There really wasn't anything else. So,
Does anyone have any questions?
yeah, does anyone have any questions? Social about bonds?
Let's talk about capitalized interest again.
Okay, next up is shared services. So Eric and I met with Laura and Tom, we met. And we spent some of our time working on the super eval, which we already talked about. So I'll skip that. And then the other thing, we just are preparing for our getting our ducks in a row for our joint board meeting on November 9th, I believe. right? Does that sound right?
It's a-
Eighth, election day, that's right, election day, November eighth. And we're meeting again next month to do our little, like, practice run, so. That was about all we had for sure services. Next up, school boarding.
We're on our third code of conduct tonight. I'll read the code and then I'll give the author's description. Code number 3 says, I will recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that discussions can be made, and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a board meeting. Author goes on to describe, school board members must learn quickly that they have only one vote and are not a majority. They shall make no promises about how a vote may proceed and not work privately outside of board meetings to influence the vote of other board members. All this will do is quickly compromise the effectiveness and trust of the offending school board member. It's just a nice reminder that, I think I've said this before, while we all have, individual voices at this table, ultimately, we always act as a whole unit. Now, that's important for us to remember, but I also think this is an important code to kind of have in your back pocket for when you're talking with the community as well. This one made me think back to last March when we were talking about masks in the school building and I remember I got one email from a community member that specifically said, Eric, do the right thing. And I thought, there's a misconception here about what my abilities are on the school board. And so, I think those are great opportunities to, share the code with the community as well. Let them know that we are a collective unit.
So do the right thing.
So do the right thing.
I think mine said Kevin through the right. thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, moving on.
unless you have something before that.
I just had a question.
Good.
So in July, there was supposed to be somebody come and talk about strategic plan, but I
Yes.
wasn't here. So how did that go? What are our next steps?
It's good. We did there's a report that we
Yes,
just
just
got
got the
today
report.
I
from
just saw
that.
it in here.
Yeah.
I just glanced at it. That was a good summary of sort of what we talked about.
I felt like at the end of the meeting, ultimately, we had discussed that a lot of the things we were talking about are in place already. The biggest takeaway that I got from it was just trying to add more structure and organization to it, because like I said, a lot of the things that we discussed are occurring. But without having, like a clear page of it or a clear structure to it, it might be just a little difficult to understand everything that's going on.
Well, I'm not sure what the lady.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what she said or what her presentation was, and if she was talking like up here. Because I think we need to look at being down here and putting that foundation in place and getting a strategic plan and making those first steps, so we start looking at where we're going, what are the goals that we're looking at, and are we looking at goals that are in tandem with the school administration, so we both are working and going to the same place. The other thing is community involvement, but not up here, and it's gotta start small, so I don't know.
So the district I work for, we have a new superintendent and she's in the process of developing the strategic plan. So her, something that I like that she's doing is doing focus groups with teachers, parents, community members and students, as well as obviously the administration, just so you can find the common themes amongst all stakeholders and then try and develop the plan from there. So just a thought, but it's been
Well,
very well
yes.
received.
That's what and how we should be doing, but
So we know everybody received this in the packet today. if, when you get a chance, what I thought is you'd have the paper copy, we'll get you the electronic copy tomorrow. But you can read through it, so you can kind of remember kind of what took place back in July. The action items that we would talk about going into next month, if you go to the last page and F, it said next steps. At that last meeting, the board agreed to get a smaller subcommittee together. And to go through and draft up what could be some district goals. And up above, section F is E, or goals based on the priorities that you had went and narrowed down. And the idea would be to have the subcommittee of the board members come together with what they thought were some of the ideal drafts that could be goals in those 4 areas. I would be working parallel with the admin saying, here's what the board's looking for generally, but you would still be defining it more to see how we can align with some of those things. And we'd come together and say, how can we blend what these two are working together? And then be able to go from there with what you'd want to do next with the strategic planning process itself. So that was where the endpoint was back in July. We talked to facilitator Ms. Martinez, but I think next meeting, you guys get a chance to go back through this document, kind of refresh yourselves from what you talked about. Ray gives you an opportunity to talk with myself, other board members with some of the key points that came up. And I think at the October meeting, we could put in play, what do you want to do for planning out the strategic planning process?
But I think kind of to answer your question, we haven't done much on it because I think in part we wanted to wait to make sure that you could be included in it. And since this was one of the things that I know you wanted to do,
Yeah.
we haven't done a whole lot other than have that meeting in your absence. But I hear that it's on next month to do, but we should all go through it.
We were also waiting for this document.
Yeah.
She took notes of everything.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So this is the first one we've seen the document since that meeting.
Even though it's dated in July, we just got
Right.
it, so
Yeah.
you didn't miss much.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you didn't. You understood what I meant. You didn't miss much.
Okay, we are on to representative updates, STEAM Foundation.
I can report, I know we talked briefly about it last time, it has now been nailed down. We're doing a Night at the Races is our fall fundraiser on November 4th. That is a Friday night. It is going to be held at Rosati's from 6:30 to 10:30. If you have not participated or been familiar with this event that they've done in the past, it's a fun night that takes place obviously not on campus and at an independent place with adults only. This is not a kids event. And it's a fun way. They have, you get funny money, pretend money as part of your ticket, and you can bet on various things. They have videos up of races, and in each race, they name all the different horses. Everybody has an opportunity if they want to. Sometimes classrooms do it. You can spend $25 to sponsor a horse, and then you get to name the horse and do whatever. And, if your horse wins, then you get something, and there's prizes and stuff. But, so I obviously, I would encourage everybody who, it's a fun event, and, it's a good way to interact with a lot of our staff and community, members and parents who go. So if that's something that interests you, I can send out the flyer. Each of the schools are sending it out, and it's hitting us with all the e-blasts and all the places, but I can certainly send there's a QR code and everything else. So if anybody is interested in sponsoring a horse, you can follow up with that on the QR code and things that I'll send out. If people don't have an interest in individually doing it, that's fine. We could all, amongst us personally take up a collection, and perhaps the Board of Education can have a horse. I don't care, whatever, but
The board horse.
the board horse, yeah. So, it's a fun event, and there's raffles and prizes and things, and it's just a chance to go out and have fun with the kids. So that is November 4th. And they had a group that was, while we were busy serving food at Prop Fest, that was working with the kiddos outside doing the little blinky lights and things that I know got swung around my house for a few days thereafter until the battery died. And they had a lot of fun. And if you know anyone interested in wanting to be part of, another volunteer opportunity, there's always looking for more board members, but that's about it. That's STEAM Foundation.
Next up,
You're gonna send a flyer out?
I can.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Next up is CEDAW.
Right. Report on the budget for the last time. Feel like I've been doing this all summer, but there was meeting cancels and hearings and it has finally been passed. With regard to us, there's a 4% tuition increase this year. And so for the services that we're currently using, tuition is set at $534,000 for fiscal year 23. Another item of note is the Fairhaven School, which is in Mundelein, which is currently owned by District 76, I believe. CEDAW is making a bid to purchase the building from them. So just something to think about. They're in our community. That they are,
Down court.
yeah, they are planning to purchase that building. And, I'll provide updates as that process continues.
Curious to see how much it sells for.
I can share, I gotta look through my emails, but I can share.
Okay,
the-
oh,
the-
that makes sense. Curious.
Are they keeping the school open?
Well, right now, CEDAW leases it from,
It's being used by.
they're
They
using
closed it as a general school.
Yeah.
The district school.
CEDAW leases it from them. They have been for the past few years and now they're making a bid to buy it. They also recently completely renovated the playground there and made it totally adaptable, adapted for individuals with special needs. Preliminary agreement for 2.15 million.
Nice.
And they applied some of the rent.
Yes.
That's a good deal for everybody. Great. Okay, next up is community outreach village liaison. Ray, you probably haven't had time to do any of that, right?
And no report.
Okay. Kevin, I did want to follow up, since we're on this topic, I did want to follow up you with some of that stuff that you gave out at the finance committee meeting. Most of it's from the village. I thought maybe I would, if we could make copies, I wanted to give this to Ray, so he was okay with this. And then, is anything happening with this, or is it just pretty much dead, or?
With the impact fees.
Yeah,
So the impact fees for that one are finalized.
Okay.
As they get larger developments potentially coming in. A conversation with the village manager is there will be a more of a one-to-one conversation of what's taking place. So that we've got more input on that process.
just so everyone knows, there's that new Morris Station project that's being developed. 176, it's that sliver of land where that recycling place used to be, right?
Yeah.
And where that was it ABC? Like supply company was there too.
Supplies.
Yeah, roofing supply, that piece of property being developed. And so Kevin just gave out this letter that normally, at least in the past, I would say historically, the district would negotiate, the school district would negotiate with the builder for impact fees. So they're building townhouses. There could be students there that affects, maybe we need to, add another wing to something, or depending on the number of students or everything. And the village went ahead and sort of negotiated for all the other governmental entities, the library, the park district, the school districts. And just sort of went ahead and do that and sort of charged, I would say, below market value from what we usually would do. And just sort of presented it, right? That's what happened.
That'd be correct.
Okay, so I was like, okay, well, then we sort of, got the shackle, but then when I read in the paper, they're having some like grand opening thing in the next couple of weeks, and they were talking about these luxury townhomes, and I'm like, but we reduced the money that we're getting, like it didn't make sense to me, but anyway. So that was something that Kevin shared. I just wanted to share that with everybody, because that's definitely village related.
Did they just go ahead and do that without contacting any of the other entities?
So they've been trying to put an ordinance together. They've told the school district that at least a year ago, not two. So it is within the village's right to be able to just establish what the impact fee amount would be. They don't have to ask for anything. And we do that with our attorneys and everything else. So it's a courtesy that they ask for input. And part of this is the end result where we had some government entities that worked with builders in the past with the impact fees, which they were more reasonable. And we had other government entities that were asking, some might consider quite large impact fees. And what was happening was the village ended up stepping in anyway. They would end up losing potential builds going out because of the disagreement. So the village took it upon themselves to just create the structure they felt would make sure they could acquire the businesses they wanted to get into the community.
And there was a lot of controversy over that land and the building and a lot of it was the Quonset hut next door and what they were gonna do there. So I know they were trying to push and get them signed up. I'm surprised that they didn't contact us.
Well, they did to tell us what they decided. I mean, how many townhouses are we talking about? I mean, it's not a big piece of land, so it can't be.
139 units.
Yeah, it was a
That's much
substantial
bigger than I
difference
thought.
between what we thought. Yeah, we ended up getting what, I forget the letter, but like 30. I thought when I first did it, and it's not knowing how many 2 and 3 bedrooms there were, but just basing off single bedroom homes. I thought the original amount was like, should be at least $800 per unit per single.
We got 288.
And then when it goes to a 2-bedroom unit, because that's typically when you have families with children, it goes to 2,100. So you find out how much 2 bedrooms, it's even more. So there was at least probably a $60,000 to $100,000 difference in what we normally would have seen in there.
Yeah, because it goes from 176 down to
All I can see.
Park
Park
Street.
Street.
Yeah, can we
And then more on the other side.
keep advocating with them and showing them how it impacts?
But I don't know why you'd want to build luxury buildings there, like those trains go by.
Yeah,
Right,
this is like an odd place.
Then I will get the copies.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you should look at this. There's a couple other things here that I got. Kevin, and then I asked you this once before because I used to go to those meetings. Do you go to the TIF meeting? Do they still do that?
They still do tip meetings, yes. So Andy and T will go through this.
Who represents the other taxing bodies, you know?
Sometimes it's the director of the library. And then it's usually either the finance person or the director of the parks.
Okay. Yeah. I was curious, because like I said, I used to go to that, so I was just wondering if, I don't know, we can't really do it. We pretty much have to do what they say anyway, so,
They're basically informing us of what they're doing.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then the last update is equity committee, and I was thinking when I saw this on the agenda that, I think the equity committee is no longer like a regular committee. I think it would be a special, like a special needs committee when we felt like we needed to look at the equity policy or there's something else that came up for equity,
I agree.
right?
The only piece would be for us to decide if we want to proceed to that next step and talking about developing a gender policy. Because we were talking about how this one was more of a racial equity, racial and ethnic equity policy that we've done, and I agree that with that accept, but whether we wanted to take that next step further. I think we have a lot of things we're working on right now. It doesn't necessarily have to be on today's plan, but that would be the only reason that I would say we keep it open and then possibly rename it or convene a whole brand new one at some point when we decide to take that on.
Okay.
So, but I agree.
All right. Okay, next up is the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to remove from the consent agenda tonight? We have, board meeting minutes, personnel report, bill list, and the renewal list FOIA requests. Hearing none, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented. Second by Mr. Hitzke. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Fingerhut. Aye. Village here.
Okay, next up is the board action items. First one is the paraprofessional compensation. I move that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the hourly wage increase as presented.
Second.
Mr. Billetier, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Carl.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Rose.
Resolution for the IASB delegate. I move that the Board of Education of Manila Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to select Christy Fingerhut as the Illinois Association of School Board delegate from Manila Elementary School District 75
Second.
Board of Education. Second by Mr. Rose. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
And I guess I'll abstain.
Okay, I move now that the Board of Education adjourn and enter an executive session at, oh, sorry. I move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve the super eval program for the cost of $2,195. Annual cost will be split between District 75 and District 120.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Okay, now I move that we enter into executive session at 10:14 PM for the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act. And semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Pelletier.
Aye.
Just to clarify, because I noticed there's a new thing on our agenda or on the board here, the sheet here in red down here, it says roll call equals money.
Secretary, please call the roll for going back into regular session.
10:20.
Yes,
Holly.
here.
Rose.
Here.
Carl. Here. Hitzke.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
Fingerhut here. Pelletier.
Here.
Okay, I move that we approve the August 23rd, 2022 executive session minutes.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Pelletier.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
And Carl.
Aye.
Okay, the follow, I move that the Board of Education of Elementary Schools 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the following closed session minutes continue to require confidentiality and are recommended to remain in the closed session file.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. And the last one is the audio recordings. I move that the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the closed session verbatim record be destroyed as presented after September 20th, 2022.
Second.
Ms. Fingerhut. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nice and clean. Okay, President's prerogative. Does anyone have any future agenda items that they would like to have on the future agendas? What's the big topic for next month?
I have it in front of me.
More data?
It's the data,
Data?
because she was.
Yeah.
In more.
All the data update and fall data, we got one.
The testing.
T might have an update on the enrollment capacity numbers too, is probably the other one we have. Those are good too.
Then for board action, I guess we're gonna have the. Stage.
Should we have the stage to come back? Just off the top of my head, yeah. Plus strategic planning.
All right, okay, yeah, we just talked about that. So everyone knows it's just about time for my show, so next month I will. All right, I always say I'm gonna be late for the meeting, but then I never show up, so. But I'd really like to be here to try to vote on the stage thing. So I will try to do that. If we could make that happen at the end, that would be lovely, but I can't guarantee. It's the beginning of tech weekend. It's just a nightmare, so I will try, but I can't guarantee anything. On a more positive note,
So maybe, I'm sorry, Kevin, so maybe if we went at the very end, so like even after executive session, the last thing before we
Yeah.
do, leave that
Yeah.
as a singleton.
yes, that would be great. Thank you.
And
On a positive note, or not a positive, anyway. Today is the first day that petitions to be on the ballot for the April 4th election can be circulated. And those things are due on between December 12th and December 19th. So if you people are interested in running again,
Would be Emily and I, and
Whoever.
Kevin Holly, whoever wants to.
Kevin Holly is retiring.
In case Kevin Holly changes.
You know, I've said that a couple times. Kevin.
Well, with this whole super available, there's no need for me to be here. anymore. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
And the other Kevin keeps drawing, he throws the line.
I've come around on it a little bit, I think. So just so you know that, you could start today. if you wanted to.
Great. The
It
IAS,
seems really early, but
well, the IASB just did a webinar that I missed, but it's recorded because I signed up for it. So just letting Emily,
Yeah, I
in
went to
case
that
you
one
didn't
as
know.
well.
Okay,
Yeah,
good. All right.
yeah, thank you.
so you got an email out and you probably knew that, but I just thought I would remind everybody. So, okay, that's all I have. Anything for the good of the group?
Also in your folder should be a pink card. It'll get you into any athletic events at the high school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Says you and a guest, which is awesome. So I have a family who now attends the football game.
Okay, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Hiskey, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone want to stay? Motion carries. Thank you.
And it is